Chapter 500. While Brother Zhou was being pretentious, many people in the capital were being pretentious as well. There were only 3 places that had planes from China to the United States: the capital, Shanghai, and Yuezhou. This group of tourists was actually from the capital, so the people they pretended to be pretentious were all from around the capital. Many people want to go and take a look after sensing that these people's 13 slots were full. The world was so big, they had to go and have a look. Not long after the first group of tourists came back, many people came to the travel agency, intending to take a look before signing up for a trip to Winthrop. Some of these people were going for the first time, and some had already booked a place for the second time. Originally, this travel agency planned to prepare for a week after returning and then finalize the itinerary in another week. That is, they would go after half a month. However, just a few days after returning, when Jiang Hai was still traveling along the United States waters, the travel agency's phone almost exploded with calls. A large group of people also came to their original location. These people came to ask, and even asked to go to Winthrop, which made the person in charge of the travel agency a little confused. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already organized a second group to head to Winthrop's. Naturally, Wu Shan and the others were still leading the group. From the time they got off the plane to the second group's departure, it only took 5 days. That is to say, before Jiang Hai arrived in Miami, the second group had already arrived. This time, the number of people was 86. Winthrop was already experienced, so they immediately arranged a car to pick them up. And after these people arrived, their friend circle of friends naturally went into an uproar. Jiang Hai's manor was still the focus of these people's attention. Many people came here to eat the seafood in Jiang Hai's manor. Edward Anderson and the others also got authorization from Jiang Hai before Jiang Hai left, so they could also sell the seafood. However, everything must be accounted for. Jiang Hai can allow them to eat as much as they want, but he can't allow these people to sell the seafood in his manor and stuff the money into their pockets. This was a matter of principle, not a matter of money. Fortunately, Edward Anderson and the others knew this very well. Moreover, Jiang Hai had already told them that they would get a 20% share of the seafood sold. A lobster was $3,000, and they could get $600. What else could be more tempting than this? So naturally, Winthrop's reputation and influence in China exploded again. The second group of tourists hasn't returned yet, but the third group of 102 people came. This time, Jiang Hai's villas can no longer be lived in. The people who opened the hotels also started to make money. Although it was impossible to charge more than Jiang Hai's seaside villa, or even half the price for them, it was just a matter of getting something for nothing. It was really profitable. Unknowingly, Winthrop became the best choice for many people who came to the United States to play. It was 13 square meters high, had delicious food, and was very cheap. The scenery was picturesque, and there were many things to play. For people in China, Winthrop had a lot of charm. At the same time, because of these people's publicity, many people who studied in Boston also knew about Winthrop. They really didn't know that there was such a fun place near them, so they were the first group of people who drove to Winthrop. For a time, Winthrop was not only popular in China, but also in the United States. When Jiang Hai started to dive and catch lobsters in Puerto Rico, the fourth group of tourists went abroad. The fourth domestic tour group had already set off. There were 124 people in this group. In less than a month, Winthrop had received about 400 Huaxia people, and dozens of Americans had also gone to visit them. Although the visitor flow was not very high, it was a heavy blow to the Boston Tourism Bureau. They were beaten until they were stunned for a moment. What was going on? Originally, Winthrop was not a very attractive place in their eyes. In other words, it was not a good tourist attraction. At the same time, they decided not to develop Winthrop to give face to their colleagues. Of course, Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace bypassed the Boston Tourism Bureau to modify Winthrop themselves. This was also one of the reasons why they were unhappy with Winthrop. But now, what is going on? How can Winthrop accept 400 Huaxia tourists in a month? Of course, 400 people was not a lot, but that was only the people in one tour group. If there were 10 people, that would be 4,000 people. Even if Winthrop only had half a year to play, 10 tour groups would still be able to accommodate more than 20,000 people. If a tourist spent $1,000 here, it would be more than $20 million. Just thinking about it made their kidneys hurt. American politics did not allow them to have a subordinate relationship. In other words, the American government could not control the state government, and the state government could not control the municipal government. Winthrop was not under the jurisdiction of the Boston Tourism Bureau. Even if it was, it had nothing to do with the Boston Tourism Bureau. It was the only place where they could make money. This was the problem with the tour groups. But the problem was that they did not promote them. In other words, these tour groups were found by Jiang Hai and had nothing to do with the Boston Tourism Bureau. As mentioned earlier, every level of government was not subordinate to the Boston Tourism Bureau. Even if they paid taxes, the national tax was paid to the American government, and the state tax was paid to the Massachusetts government. It had nothing to do with the Boston Tourism Bureau. The rest of the money belonged to the town hall. Seeing that Winthrop was popular, the Boston Tourism Bureau officials were stunned. After discussing it for a few days, they felt reluctant to give up on this big cake. So, they took the initiative to discuss with Mayor Wallace if they could invest more in Winthrop and promote it. Then, they could get a share of the pie. But Mayor Wallace did not care at all. In the beginning, he was also very worried about these Huaxia tourists. He was afraid that they would not be willing to spend money here and that they would not want to come. After all, Huaxia did not have a beach. Why did they have to come here? But when a number of tourists came up, he knew that Jiang Hai was right. He just had to do what Jiang Hai said. What Boston government? Who cares about them? Therefore, the people they sent were ruthlessly rejected. Only Jiang Hai did not know about this. If Jiang Hai knew, he would probably open a bottle of red wine to celebrate. For the time being, they did not care about Winthrop. Jiang Hai and the others had already caught a lot of lobsters in the sea. After catching enough to eat, Jiang Hai and the others stopped catching and began to play by the sea. On such a hot day, it was very comfortable to soak in the sea. After swimming for half a day, Jiang Hai and the others were also a little hungry. They swam back to the boat and made a dish of baked lobsters because they caught too many lobsters. Because the Caribbean lobsters here grew everywhere throughout the year, their sizes were really not small. The food that they picked wasn't small. But even so, the smallest one weighed about 6 jeans, while the big ones weighed about 13 or 4 jeans. These big ones were caught by Jiang Hai and the others. Delina and the others couldn't swim underwater with these guys. 13 or 14 kilograms of lobsters were directly chopped off with a knife. If people in China saw this, they would probably be scolded to death. One must know that lobsters also have a lobster brain. Most importantly, although the spiky dragon didn't have pincers like the Boston lobster, it still had a lot of meat inside its barbed tentacles. This meat was worth a lot of money in the country. But here, no one cared about this. The heads of the lobsters were directly thrown into the sea. Naturally, there would be fish to eliminate them. As for the tail of the lobster, it was cut from the middle, then a thick layer of cheese was placed on it and placed in the oven to bake. After taking it out and eating it, the taste was quite irresistible. Even Kevin and the others ate it with a happy face. There was no other way. Although there was no shortage of lobsters in Puerto Rico, and they could eat it whenever they wanted, the cheese here was very expensive. Basically, the cheese that could be bought here was made in the United States. The cheese on Jiang Hai's ship was bought from Zhangdi Shanghai supermarket. None of them were made in the United States. They were all original goods from Europe. Everyone knew that cheese was naturally better in Europe. In the past, Jiang Hai did not have many opportunities to eat cheese in China, but he liked to eat pizza. After arriving in the United States, naturally, he would eat all kinds of cheese. It was only after he arrived here that he realized that cheese wasn't something that could be casually used. For example, cheese was used on pizza, salad, or bread. They were all different. In summary, the most famous cheese in the world, for example, the French's favorite cheese was Byron cheese, followed by Bosworth cheese. This cheese was made from goat's milk, so it was not as sour as yogurt. It had a soft taste and was quite good. Next was cheddar cheese, which was made in the United Kingdom. It could be eaten directly as a seasoning, and it tasted very good. Next was red county cheese, which tasted a little sour and a little salty. To be honest, the taste was a little strange. There was also Carmana cheese, which was the cheese in Tom and Jerry's. The pits on it were due to fermentation. It was very hard, but it had a strong, fruity taste. It tasted very good. Those who liked it would like it very much. Those who did not like it would not like it. Next was mozzarella cheese. Anyone who ate pizza knew this kind of cheese. This kind of cheese was the special cheese for pizza. Pizza made with other kinds of cheese was not pizza. This kind of cheese had to be eaten with pizza. In addition, there was Stilton cheese, red Lister cheese, Vinzler cheese, and so on. Jianghai had everything here. Chapter 501. Hello, boss. When are you coming back? The grapes in the vineyard are almost ripe. Listening to Aphrodite's voice on the other side of the phone, Jianghai's heart couldn't help but soften. In fact, the relationship between him and Aphrodite, it's a mess. But this is just talk. If you really want him and Aphrodite to confirm something, he can't be sure. It should be soon. That is, we will be returning in the next few days. After shaking his head, Jianghai said to Aphrodite on the other side of the phone, after shaking his head to get rid of the unrealistic thoughts in his mind. After giving a rough date, he hung up the phone. Speaking of which, Jianghai has now left the Winthrop Manor for more than half a month. He spent 7 days circling the east coast of the United States, then stayed for a day in Miami, then came to Puerto Rico. After resting for a day, he went tuna fishing on the first day, lobster on the second day, and tuna fishing on the third day, but changed his position. On the fourth day, because he was a little bored playing at sea, he went to San Juan to officially say goodbye to Kevin and the others. In fact, the reason why Jianghai came here was mainly because he had found the location of the 3 sunken ships nearby. But unfortunately, these sunken ships were not as good as the previous one, and there were no rare treasures in these sunken ships. Moreover, most of the things were still gold coins and silver coins, and even gems were very few. If the first ship is worth 200 million, then the next 2 ships are only worth about 300 million. Together, the 3 ships are worth 500 million. This is still 500 million short of the gap in Jianghai's heart. Now it seems that if Jianghai's goal is only tens of millions or even hundreds of millions, then fishing for the treasures on these sunken ships is still very good. But if the gap is so big, fishing for the treasures on the sunken ships is a bit unrealistic. After all, not all sunken ships have a Spanish golden armor on them, right? So after finding the 3 ships, Jianghai went around to the Caribbean Sea to look for other ships there. After arriving in San Juan on the 4th day, he still played around in the city. At night, he sailed away from the port and went to a place about 170 nautical miles away from San Juan. According to the mark on the sea map, there is a sunken ship here. After Jianghai went to the sea, he found that this sunken ship is a bit interesting, because although there are still gold coins and gems on the ship, they are piled up in 3 rooms. According to Jianghai's estimation, the things on this ship are worth 400 million. In this way, his money should be almost complete. The 500 million yuan from before, plus the 400 million yuan here, should be enough. Since the location has been determined, Jianghai didn't hold back. The next day, they were still in San Juan, but at night, Jianghai quietly went there and skillfully brought the treasures up. This time, except for Belle Lester, the other 4 people helped. Halaman's mind was simple, and since Jianghai told him not to say anything, he wouldn't say anything. Jianghai trusted Azalina very much, and as for Delina and Marion, there were very few people in the manor who knew Jianghai's secret. Jianghai didn't hide anything from them. Of course, he didn't say that he didn't trust Belle, so he let Belle go to San Juan for fun. According to him, this was to let Belle relax, and Belle wouldn't let go of such an opportunity. When the ship sailed back the next day, Jianghai's bottommost cabin was already filled with gold coins and gems. The next day, which was the 6th day since Jianghai came to the Caribbean Sea, he returned to the dock where he first landed. Then at night, he went to the 3rd sunken ship to get the things on it. Then on the 7th day, he got the treasures from the lobster. According to his estimation, he should go and get the last ship tomorrow, which was the first ship that Jianghai found. After getting the ship, Jianghai would return to Miami. Moses Adams had already contacted the people in Phillips. These people were quite satisfied with Jiang Hai's arrival, because they knew that as long as Jiang Hai came, he would bring them great wealth. Naturally, but didn't dare to say much, and had prepared enough security forces. After everything was done, Jiang Hai stayed at the dock for another day. After buying a lot of souvenirs, he sailed back to the first place when night fell. This time, Bo was also on the ship, and this was the only time he was on a ship. However, Jiang Hai didn't let him out of the house. Although Bell felt that Jiang Hai was treating him differently, he didn't care, because he knew that sometimes the more he knew, the easier it was for something to happen. It was better for him to know less. After everything was arranged, Jiang Hai put on his equipment, carried a large bottle of oxygen and a lot of bags, and dived into the deep sea. This time, he was really familiar with the place. After all, he had just been here not long ago. In less than half an hour, he had already seen the ship. After getting on the ship, he walked towards the second floor, but when he came to the second floor, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. This was because he clearly remembered that when he first came here, there were a lot of small fishes on the second floor. But at this time, these fishes had disappeared. Not even insects could be seen. This made Jiang Hai's brows wrinkle. "What's going on?" he muttered in a low voice. Since Jiang Hai had the Dragon Balls, he was very sensitive to these kinds of dangers. He threw a fluorescent rod down, and after waiting for a long time, there was no movement. Jiang Hai slowly walked towards the second floor, but when he reached the second floor, there were indeed no fish nearby. No fish at all. In addition to the fish, there were no other animals. The only things that grew here were the seaweeds and moss. As Jiang Hai entered the water, the seaweeds were constantly swaying, setting off an unusual atmosphere. I saw a ghost. Although there was nothing on the second floor, Jiang Hai felt that his heart was constantly thumping. He knew that this was a feeling of nervousness and fear, but except for the first time in the water, he hadn't felt like this for a long time. He felt as if there was something terrible waiting for him at the end of the corridor. This made him a little depressed. He was a materialist. He didn't believe in ghosts or gods at all. Although there was no way to explain the Dragon Balls on his body, and there was no way to explain the dragon skeleton that he found at the beginning. But he believed that even if there were ghosts or gods in this world, he was the only one. There was nothing supernatural in this world, and he was not afraid of the creatures in the natural environment. Moreover, this place was only so small, and the corridor was only 2 meters wide. What kind of monster could there be here? Sharks? It's not like he hasn't killed them before. Not to mention ordinary sharks. He even killed a group of hammerhead sharks. Now, even if there was a great white shark, he was not afraid. What's more, if it was really a large shark, it would be strange if it could move here. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's mood also became relaxed. "I'm not afraid." Patting his cheeks, Jiang Hai walked forward again, but he had already taken the spear in his hand. He walked to the end of the second floor, but there was nothing here. This made Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at the third floor. It seems that the feeling of danger came from the third floor. Sure enough, when Jiang Hai's head looked at the bottom of the third floor, he was surprised to find that the skeletons that were originally under the bottom of the ship had all disappeared. Not a single bone was left. Seeing this, Jiang Hai instantly felt a chill running from his back to his scalp. The 36,000 pores on his body opened in an instant, and the cold juice was squeezed out of his forehead. But he was now in the water, and as soon as the juice appeared, it was taken away by the water. This made Jiang Hai also force himself to calm down. Picking up a fluorescent stick, Jiang Hai threw it into the third floor. But after waiting for more than 10 minutes, there was no movement on the third floor. This made Jiang Hai puzzled, but also a little relieved. It seems that even if the skeletons suddenly came back to life, they shouldn't be on the third floor. Maintaining a very fast heartbeat, Jiang Hai slowly touched the third floor, but looking at it, the third floor was still the same as before. This made him feel a little strange, but now wasn't the time to explore what happened here. Jiang Hai quickly went to the 2 warehouses and threw a fluorescent stick inside. After confirming that there was nothing inside, Jiang Hai went into one of the warehouses and began to put things inside. The warehouse was quickly filled up. Then he went to the plate armor and put these things on it. Then he went to the third floor and continued to put the treasures in the room. Nothing happened while he was putting them, which made Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel that he was thinking too much. The treasures in this room were almost the same as those in the previous room. Jiang Hai had more than a dozen large bags of treasures. Therefore, he was able to sweep the room clean. In the end, under Jiang Hai's sweeping, all the treasures in the room were swept clean. But just as he was about to carry the treasures, suddenly, a black shadow slowly passed through the door of the treasure room and appeared behind Jiang Hai. Then this black shadow slowly rose. When it rose to about 3 meters high, it suddenly whipped at the back of Jiang Hai's head like a stick. At this critical moment, Jiang Hai's super perception played a key role at this time. He instantly pulled up a bag of treasures beside him and threw it behind him. With a muffled bang, the bag of treasures was scattered by the strange thing. Jiang Hai got an opportunity and turned his head. When his headlamp shone on the black shadow, Jiang Hai couldn't help but take a deep breath. At the same time, another black shadow slowly rose behind him. Chapter 502. F***CK. Is it an octopus or a squid? Looking at the monster in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think. He saw that the monster in front of him wasn't actually a whole body, but a single tentacle. But even this tentacle was 3 meters long, and the whole tentacle was as thick as the largest baseball bat. The most important thing was that this tentacle was covered with fist-sized suction cups, and in each suction cup, there was a sharp claw with barbs like fangs. After being hit by the treasure that Jiang Hai threw out, this tentacle instantly entangled the bag of treasure and directly tore it into pieces. The net made of pure metal was as weak as a plastic bag under its strength. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai knew that the fear in the depths of his heart should come from this monster. Looking at this monster with a 3-meter-long tentacle in front of him, who knows how big this monster is? So Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to fight it head-on, but wanted to sneak away quietly. But just as Jiang Hai was about to leave the room, suddenly a stream of water came from behind him. He didn't have time to look back and instantly fell forward, dodging the attack behind him. When he looked back, another tentacle had already unknowingly drilled out from a hole on the other side of the room, almost wrapping him up. And just as Jiang Hai fell to the ground, the original tentacle seemed to know that Jiang Hai was lying there. In an instant, it rolled over again. Looking at the 2 tentacles in front of him, Jiang Hai instantly pulled out his 2 harpoons. At the most critical moment, the 2 harpoons were also launched, only to hear 2 clanging sounds. The harpoons carried the 2 large tentacles directly into the room. At this moment, the whole ship shook. But Jiang Hai didn't care so much at this time. He didn't want the treasure anymore. He bent his back and ran out of the door. But as soon as he went out, he saw countless tentacles rushing in from the entrance of the 3rd and 4th floor. Looking at the tentacles rushing towards him, Jiang Hai didn't have the leisure to chat there. He immediately swam forward at the fastest speed. Yes, he has already started swimming, not walking. In the blink of an eye, he had already reached the entrance of the 3rd floor. After going up to the 2nd floor, he didn't run to the 1st floor because at this time, those tentacles saw that there was no way to catch up with Jiang Hai directly. They had already changed their direction. Whether it's an octopus or a squid, they're all very stupid. But sometimes, a stupid method is more powerful than a smart one. For example, now that it knows that it can't catch up with Jiang Hai, it might as well directly destroy the ship. So when Jiang Hai arrived at the 2nd floor, 3 tentacles forcibly broke the rotten wood of the 2nd floor and blocked in front of Jiang Hai. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai's original plan couldn't be carried out, but this didn't mean that he would be captured without a fight. He had already seen the situation here when he came in. How could he give this guy such a chance? In an instant, Jiang Hai swam into a sailor's room next to him. Without saying anything, he directly kicked the wall of the sailor's room. With a loud bang, the wall of the sailor's room was shattered by Jiang Hai's kick, and he instantly swam out of the sailor's room. Feeling that the prey had swam away, the monster in the sailor's room couldn't help but become angry. It began to shake violently. How could this 300-year-old shipwreck withstand the shaking of this monster? After shaking a few times, Jiang Hai only heard a loud crack. The shipwreck had been directly shaken into pieces by this monster. In the muddy with fragments and sand, a giant monster slowly appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Squid, giant spear squid. Looking at the emergence of the giant beast, Jiang Hai couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He felt a bit of pain in his throat. He could feel that he was really in trouble this time. Giant spear squid, scientific name king sour squid, was the world's largest mollusk and the most famous deep-sea monster. It was mainly distributed in the Antarctic continent, but after all, this thing was alive, so it would sometimes wander around. South America, South Africa, and even New Zealand had traces of it. This monster could grow up to more than 20 meters long. Obviously, in the past, Jiang Hai had never thought that this was a serious matter. This was because he had encountered king sour squid when he was diving. The largest one was about 5 or 6 meters long. He had even solved one before, but now he believed in it. Because at this time, in front of him was definitely a grandfather's king sour squid. Its whole body was dark red, as if it had been smeared with blood. Its whole body was at least 23 meters tall. King sour squid was born quickly, but it also died quickly. An average king sour squid only had a lifespan of 450 days, but Jiang Hai felt that at that time, this guy would definitely have lived for more than just a year. Otherwise, with this guy's small brain, how could he think of tactics? This was all hunting experience. As this giant monster broke free from the pirate ship, this guy's big shining eyes also stared at Jiang Hai. Looking at this guy, Jiang Hai's first thought was to run, but the problem was, could he run? His maximum speed was 10 nautical miles per hour. At this speed, he could still run when facing ordinary sharks and the like. But facing this guy, he really had no confidence. But now, even if he had no confidence, he had to try. Jiang Hai took a deep breath and looked at the giant monster slowly swimming out of the sand. His body flashed, and in an instant, he rushed towards the sea surface. But just as Jiang Hai thought, this guy was not going to let go of Jiang Hai, this delicious snack. As this king sour squid spat out a stream of water, it flew out from its original place like a torpedo in an instant. It did not give Jiang Hai a chance to think at all. When Jiang Hai turned his head, he had already seen its big eyes upside down moving forward. Seeing this, Jiang Hai did not say anything and immediately turned around. At the same time, he reloaded his spear and shot it at its eyes. However, the king sour squid's protection of its eyes was extremely strong. In an instant, it swung its wrist and used one of its tentacles to block Jiang Hai's spear. Although the tentacle was pierced, it was only limited to that. At the same time, its remaining tentacles were like blooming chrysanthemums, wrapping around Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai looked at the incoming tentacles and the faintly visible giant mouth in front of him. His original self-confidence was shattered at this time. He originally thought that after reaching level 3, he could go anywhere in this sea area. Now it seemed that he was too naive, really too naive. Looking at the giant mouth in front of him, Jiang Hai shot another spear, but it was blocked by the tentacles again. Jiang Hai pulled out the gunpowder weapon that he originally carried, the underwater pistol at this time. However, although the bullets could injure this guy, they were not fatal at all. Squid were mollusks. Even if they were cut into pieces, they would still live for a while. Therefore, if one wanted to kill it, there was only one way, and it had only one weakness. One was to exhaust it, like a sperm whale, and the other was to directly hit its otolith. However, this guy was more than 20 meters long, and its otolith was only the size of a pinky fingernail. How could one hit it? Therefore, Jiang Hai fired all the bullets underwater, but it was only a stalemate for a moment. In the next second, a tentacle instantly wrapped around Jiang Hai's waist and sent him into this guy's mouth. Feeling the sharp claws on the tentacle scratching him painfully, Jiang Hai could not help but think sorrowfully. Could it be that this book ends here? Looking at the giant mouth that was getting closer and closer to him, a thought flashed in Jiang Hai's mind. However, as soon as this thought flashed, he suppressed it. What a joke. The female lead had not been decided yet. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai instantly took off his gloves. His right hand instantly pressed on the slippery tentacle wrapped around him. Then, the thin spirit energy instantly entered the body of this giant spear squid. As the spirit energy entered, the giant spear squid that originally wanted to eat Jiang Hai could not help but be stunned. A pair of big fluorescent eyes stared at Jiang Hai. Just like this, after Jiang Hai and this big guy looked at each other for 5 minutes, the big guy's eyes suddenly changed. Jiang Hai felt that it seemed to be smiling at him because the appearance of its eyes changed. Then, the big guy's tentacle slowly moved Jiang Hai from its mouth to its eyes. After deliberately rubbing its face against Jiang Hai, it slowly let go of its tentacle. It's working. Escaping from death, truly escaping from death. Looking at the appearance of the giant spear squid, Jiang Hai let out a long breath. He really did not think that he could actually escape with his life like this. It seemed that modern equipment was useful, but when it encountered a giant beast, it was useless. The most useful thing was still his own spirit energy. This was the best thing to play with. Taking a deep breath, Jiang Hai put his hand on the head of this giant spear squid again. This time, he directly used 2 pieces of spirit energy and injected it into the body of this giant spear squid. In total, he used 3 pieces of spirit energy, and these 3 pieces of spirit energy were equivalent to 9 pieces of spirit energy in the dragon stage. This spirit energy was enough to benefit this giant spear squid a lot. Looking at this cheerful squid, Jiang Hai could not help but touch his chin. It seemed that he had the most powerful bodyguard. After playing with this guy for a while, Jiang Hai went back to the broken sailboat and picked up the bags again. But this time, he did not have to carry them. The giant spear squid had become Jiang Hai's little brother. After taking the initiative to take the bags, it floated to the surface with Jiang Hai. After telling the giant spear squid to lie under the bottom of his boat, Jiang Hai carried these bags back to the boat. As soon as he got on the boat, Jiang Hai let out a long breath. Tonight was too exciting. Chapter 503. Mr. Jiang, we have appraised this batch of jewelry. The total market value is about $900 million. We still need to calculate the specific price. Are you going to sell it or let us auction it? Sitting in the VIP lounge of Phillips Auction House in Miami, the Arabian who had a relationship with Jiang Hai asked Jiang Hai with a smile. His flattering look was quite nasty. I'll sell it to you directly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai muttered in his heart. He still has 800 million yuan, but 600 million yuan will be taxed next year. He still has 200 million yuan left. Including 900 million yuan, that would be 1 billion yuan. He could spend 1 billion yuan to buy 1 billion yuan of oil futures, and then he can use the remaining 100 million yuan as his usual mobile cash. Well, I'll do it. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the salesman also smiled and went to the side to make a phone call. Looking at him, Jiang Hai also leaned his head back on the sofa and began to close his eyes to rest. Moses Adams, who was beside him, was also sitting there calmly, waiting for the contract to be signed in a while. Jiang Hai was really tired right now. Of course, he wasn't referring to his body being tired. With his physical fitness that was 4 times the limit of a human, it wasn't easy to tire him out. The tiredness he was talking about was the mental tiredness. It couldn't be helped. After all, no one would feel relaxed after experiencing the fierce battle last night. However, the only good thing was that this guy had now become Jiang Hai's bodyguard. Thinking about it, if Jiang Hai wanted to salvage shipwrecks in the future with such a big bodyguard, it would be much easier for him. Except for the giant sperm whale, this guy was definitely the strongest existence in the sea. With such a strong bodyguard, Jiang Hai could escape into the water if he could not beat others. The water was his world. After dealing with the big squid last night, Jiang Hai let it attach to his ship and set a target. After returning to Miami, he first put the things into his room, then called Azalina, Delina, and Marion. After classifying and counting the treasures, he took the other hidden treasures into his room alone. After a night of sailing, they had arrived in Miami early the next morning. Moses Adams had already talked to Phillips and came to the dock to pick up Jiang Hai and goods. Only Jiang Hai got off the ship. The others stayed on the ship, but Belle, Harriman, and Azalina each received $1 million. Needless to say, they knew what the money was for. It was hush money or a fee for their hard work. This was why Belle was willing to know nothing. While these people were resting on the ship, Jiang Hai went to Phillips's auction house with Moses Adams. After nearly a day of counting, they soon gave Jiang Hai a number that he had in mind. Since it was not the first time they had worked together, Moses Adams would keep an eye on it. The rest had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Despicable mother, AI, eagle honored, 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 despicable mother, AI. While Jiang Hai was resting with his eyes closed, his phone rang. It was a song by an American rock band called Maroon 5. It was a new song released last year. The name was Beast, Aguinette. Of course, this song was not what Jiang Hai liked. It was because Kevin and the others liked it. Children at this age liked rock music the most. After hanging out with them for a few days, Delina and Marion also started to like this song. Therefore, regardless of whether Jiang Hai was willing or not, they changed Jiang Hai's mobile phone's ringtone to this song. Jiang Hai usually didn't change his mobile phone's ringtone. It was always them who changed it. Sometimes, when the music played, Jiang Hai didn't even know that it was his mobile phone that was ringing. When the song rang, Jiang Hai was startled. He picked up the phone and looked at the name on it. Jiang Hai was a little surprised. "Hello, Du Feynman. Why are you calling me?" After glancing at the name on the phone, Jiang Hai thought for a moment before answering the call. Yes, the person who called was none other than Du Feynman. "Hey, bro, I'm very sad to hear you say that. In my opinion, we are friends." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman laughed and said. Hearing his hearty laughter, Jiang Hai chuckled. "Is this guy my friend?" Perhaps, but Jiang Hai did not think that there was any real friendship between them. "Well, bro, why did you call me? It can't be just to exchange pleasantries, right?" Hearing Du Feynman's voice, Jiang Hai laughed and said, if he really called just to exchange pleasantries, then he did not care. "I just want to ask about you. Of course, I also have some small matters to discuss with you. I heard that you recently got a batch of treasures. Oh my God, I'm a little envious of you. You're the illegitimate son of God. The goddess of luck must have an affair with you." Hearing Jiang Hai's laughter, Du Feynman also laughed and said, "Well, am I the illegitimate son of God? I don't think so, because I'm a pure Huaxia. As for the goddess of luck you mentioned, if she is really a beauty, I don't mind having an affair with her." Hearing Du Feynman's words, Jiang Hai chuckled. In fact, he had already guessed that Du Feynman would definitely know about him selling his treasures in Phillips. "I'm calling to tell you that your batch of jewelry has been intercepted by me. I think I need these things more than Phillips. As for the money I'll give you, I may not have 900 million in cash, but I can take out 1 billion in oil futures. I wonder if you're interested? I remember you once said that you wanted to buy some more, so I'll buy it with these." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman also laughed and then said seriously, 1 billion in oil futures? Are you sure? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai could not help but frown. Originally, he wanted to buy these things, but this guy actually took the initiative to send these treasures to Jiang Hai. This made Jiang Hai a little confused because he never believed in the saying of a pie falling from the sky, because the pie was very likely to be a trap. Even if Jiang Hai's batch of jewelry was sold separately, it would probably not be sold for 1 billion. After all, there was not much room for gold and silver coins, and there was a large quantity of them, so these things basically had a price. Under such circumstances, Du Feynman was actually willing to take out 1 billion in oil futures? Jiang Hai felt a little incredulous. After all, there was no oil in 10 years that did not have a beneficial price. His 1 billion in oil futures would at least have a beneficial price of 20% to 30%, which was 1. 2 billion to 1. 3 billion. He did not believe that someone would give him $4 for no reason. So as soon as Du Feynman's voice fell, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts, "Hey, brother, that thing is very valuable in your eyes, but in fact, in our eyes, it's not very valuable, at least not as valuable as Nahi, right?" Listening to Jiang Hai's doubts on the other side of the phone, Du Feynman said with a smile, "If this is your final answer, then I'm very happy to sell it. But are you sure there are no additional terms? Hearing him say this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and asked Du Feynman on the other side of the phone with some confusion. Of course, that's that. If there's something, I'll look for you directly. This is not a prerequisite for the deal between us. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman said directly, If that's what you said, of course I'm willing. I'm in Miami now. When can you come over? It would be a waste not to take advantage of the situation. Jiang Hai had already made it very clear that he said there were no additional conditions, so Jiang Hai didn't care. I'm still in Dubai. You know, I'm discussing the oil transfer with people in your country. I can't go to the United States now, but my lawyer is there. He has full authority to discuss this deal with you. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was amused. It seems that this guy really doesn't care about $1 billion in oil futures. He just sent a lawyer over? It's $1 billion, not 1 billion Korean won or 1 billion Vietnamese dong. This money is not a small amount. Even for these rich people, at least for Jiang Hai, this is 1/3 of his net worth. But it seems that he really doesn't care. It doesn't matter, but I still think it's better to talk to you in person. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said to the other side of the phone, That's true. After all, I don't trust others to manage $1 billion yuan. How about this? Didn't I say that I was going to visit you? On August 24th, I'll be going to Atlantic City in the United States to watch a UFC fight. When that time comes, I'll drop by your place. If you have time, you can come over and sign the contract with me. As for this batch of jewelry, you can store it in Philips for now. Don't worry, it's free. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman on the other side of the phone thought for a moment and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. It was already August 15th, August 24th. There were only a few days left. After he sent these people home, he would personally make a trip to Atlantic City. The last time he went, it was because of Prawalton, but the two inexplicably had a relationship. To be honest, Jiang Hai actually wanted to avoid her, but to be honest, he was still quite interested in Atlantic City. After all, it was the second largest gambling city in the United States, and he had never been there in his life. It was good to go once in a while. And most importantly, he was going there to discuss a deal worth more than $1 billion. Chapter 504. Translator. Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. The morning sun shone on the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. A large fishing boat was slowly moving through Sandy Bay with a boat full of tourists. A large trawler was also working behind their boat. The tourists had never seen such a boat before. One or two of them leaned against the side of the boat, watching the waves that the boat stirred up or the small fish that jumped out of the water from time to time. Of course, more people were keen to take photos there and post them on their WeChat moments when they returned to the hotel. A Huaxia SIM card could not be used in the United States unless you had an international call card. Only then would you be able to make calls and surf the internet in the United States. However, not many people knew how to make calls and surf the internet. Many people from Winthrop were living a good life that they could never have imagined before. For example, the fishermen who drove fishing boats. For example, the people who opened horse farms and hotels were all earning a lot of money. In less than a month, they had earned more than what they had earned in an entire season. Although it was tuna fishing season, many Winthrop fishermen did not go to Cape Cod to participate in the annual feast. In their opinion, they would be working their day and night for 2 months, and it would be extremely hard. It would be good if they could earn $100,000 from a single boat. If they want to hire someone, they would have to pay at least $20,000. The remaining $80,000, after paying 35% of the national tax and state taxes, would be around $40,000 to $50,000. Indeed, this amount of money would be equivalent to their annual income, but they did not need to suffer this time. They could earn money by staying at home. Why would they go there and suffer? Just like now, they could go to Winthrop every morning to get people. After that, they would go around Sandy Bay and catch 2 nets of fish. One person had to pay $20 to play on the boat, which was the latest price. 10 people would be $200. Besides, there were more than 10 people on the boat every day. There were more than 30 people on the boat right now, which added up to more than $600. They could eat the fish, prawns, crabs, and lobsters that they caught. How much could one person eat? 3 kilograms? 4 kilograms? 5 kilograms? Moreover, there were old people and children on the boat. If each person was 3 kilograms, 30 people would be about 100 kilograms. With one net, they could easily catch 200 to 300 kilograms of fish. With 2 nets, they could catch at least 500 kilograms, which was 1,000 kilograms. These people would also buy the fish at a discount of 10% from the market price, which consumed another 100 kilograms. He could easily earn more than $2,000 a day by selling the rest of the goods to fishing companies. That would be $60,000 in a year and $120,000 in 2 months. Not to mention that this was a business that could last him for half a year. Even if he just lay down at home in the winter, he would still make $360,000 a month. After paying taxes, he would have at least $200,000 left. After deducting the $50,000 for gas, he would still have $150,000 left. What, wear, and tear on the boat? How much did a new boat cost? Besides, there are no strong winds or big waves in the inner bay. There was no fear of conflict, so how could there be any wear and tear? Most importantly, they didn't need to look for helpers at all. One family was enough. This way, they could save more than $100,000 a year. For fishermen, they didn't need bicycles at all. Moreover, in the winter, they could go fishing in the ocean to earn some income. Just thinking about it made them feel good. They had only heard that the tourists in Huaxia were not short of money and were very generous, but they didn't expect them to be so rich. Of course, they also knew who attracted these tourists, so Jiang Hai's reputation in Winthrop was very high. If Jiang Hai said that he wanted to be the mayor and asked the townspeople to vote for him, no matter who the other party was, he would probably get a landslide victory. "Mr. Captain, are we in the Atlantic Ocean now?" Just as the captain was enjoying himself, a man stood up and asked. Hearing his question, the captain slowly explained. "What do you think?" Hearing his question, the captain slowly explained. He knew that there were specialized translators in this team, and many of them could speak English. However, some of them couldn't speak very well. As long as he spoke slowly, most of these people could understand. "We are now in the Atlantic Ocean, but not too far from the shore. This place is also called Sandy Bay." Then the captain explained what Sandy Bay was. The so-called Sandy Bay didn't just refer to a bay. There were many bays with the same name. Of course, this was not because of the same name, but because many bays were indeed called Sandy Bay. The original meaning of Sandy Bay was Sandy Bay. The so-called Sandy Bay was also called Sandy Bay, which was a bay near the continental shelf. However, the water here was generally not deep, and below it was sand. There were no reefs or corals. It was suitable for playing and catching fish, but not suitable for a harbor or diving. There were many sandy bays not only in the United States, but also in China. In Jiang Hai's fishing ground, in addition to the corals, the Sandy Bay, where Edward Anderson took Jiang Hai and the others to catch fish, was his Sandy Bay. However, at this time, Jiang Hai Sandy Bay had become a seaweed forest, which was also the favorite place for his fish to play. Of course, the place where they were now was not Jiang Hai Sandy Bay, but a private place. Wow, look, what is that? Just as the captain was explaining the composition of the Sandy Bay, a tourist suddenly exclaimed. Hearing his exclamation, the captain couldn't help but look back, which made him frown. Although there was still a lot of fog on the sea at this time, he could see that it should be a ship, and it's not slow. If it was just a ship, then he wouldn't care, but the problem is that this ship is moving very fast, and it's coming towards him. He is not afraid of hitting his ship, but if it scares away his fish, then it will be troublesome. Fortunately, when he saw the other party also saw him and slowly slowed down. As the ship broke through the fog, the captain also saw the appearance of the incoming ship. When he saw the metallic and cool ship, he couldn't help but laugh, and the tourists over there began to shout and take photos. What a joke! Although many of them haven't been on a yacht before, it doesn't mean that they haven't seen it before. A yacht, a real yacht, and it's so handsome. How can they not be surprised? Hey John, welcome back. Seeing that the two ships were about to pass by each other, the captain here grabbed the radio in his captain's room and shouted at the other ship. Not long after, his radio also rang. "Ah, thank you. It's really tiring to play this round. how's your harvest? Listening to the slightly familiar but strange voice on the other side of the radio, the captain knew that it was Jiang Hai's voice. He and Jiang Hai didn't know each other, or it could be said that he knows Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai doesn't know him, but now Jiang Hai can reply, which makes him very happy. Not bad. Thank you for introducing the tourists. Hearing the words on the radio, the bearded captain continued. Then treat them well and let them know that our Winthrop is a good place. Hearing the captain's words, Jiang Hai also said something, then hung up the radio and accelerated towards Winthrop. Captain, do you know the owner of that ship? Seeing the ship leave quickly, the crowd reacted. A few people who were about the same age as the captain came over and asked him curiously. Of course, all Winthrop people know him, Jiang Hai. The reason why you came here is also because of him. At the same time, he is also the richest, most handsome, and most talented person in Winthrop. Most importantly, I heard that he is less than 30 years old. Hearing these people's words, the captain seemed to be afraid that others would mistakenly think that he didn't know Jiang Hai, so he deliberately introduced Jiang Hai loudly. Hearing what he said, many people's eyes lit up. Then you can ask him to let us take a ride on his yacht. Hearing the captain's words, the people here immediately asked, looking at him eagerly. If they go on that yacht, they will have something to brag about when they return home. That won't do. That's Jiang Hai's baby. Let alone you. Even we Winthrop people haven't been on it. The captain shook his head. Although he bragged a little too much just now, he wasn't stupid. Asking Jiang Hai to borrow a yacht? It would be strange if he borrowed it. Then why don't you tell us more about Jiang Hai? At this time, some women came over and asked the captain with a smile on their faces. Rich, handsome, talented, less than 30 years old, and a big yacht. This made these women quite curious about Jiang Hai. Regarding the request of these beautiful women, the bearded captain smiled and said, Yes. Although Jiang Hai had been in Winthrop for less than a year, his deeds were very long. First, he came to the United States alone to buy a manor. Then he beat up more than a dozen punks in the town alone. Then he shocked the world with a beef show, funded the tourism development of the town, and defeated the Boston gang with an M134. Although this was the case, if Jiang Hai heard it, he would probably sweat to death. In the eyes of the bearded man, Jiang Hai had already become an American hero, and the most important thing was that he was very rich and not a playboy. Unlike Iron Man's Tony Stark, he was more like Batman's Bruce Wayne, except that he wasn't as dark. Under the starry-eyed eyes of these girls, the bearded man became happier and happier as he talked. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know this, because he had already controlled his boat and came to his fishing ground. Chapter 505. This will be your home in the future. Don't catch those dolphins, tuna, sharks, and other valuable things. Those lobsters, you can do as you see fit. Stopping the boat in the open sea, Jiang Hai walked out of the cabin and came to the platform. He put his hand in the water, and not long after, the huge head of the giant spear squid emerged from the water. After sending another stream of aura to it, Jiang Hai spoke to it. After this giant spear squid was taken in by Jiang Hai, he gave it a name according to convention. But with Jiang Hai's imagination, it's hard to say what he will name these guys. For example, his family's dog. And the name of this giant spear squid, Jiang Hai decided after thinking about it for 2 days. Okay, let's go, Roger. Finally, he patted the head of this big guy. As his biggest bodyguard in the sea, Jiang Hai waved his hand, and it went deep into the sea. Now it seems that Jiang Hai's sea defense is quite good. With Big Fool and Big Fool's wife, 2 sharks, a dozen dolphins, and the addition of Roger, they should be impregnable. The reason why Jiang Hai called this giant squid Roger, and not giant squid, spear, ink, and so on, was mainly because this guy was a squid found on a pirate ship. Pirates and squids are pirates, and the king of pirates is called Gordita Roger, so he finally decided to call this giant spear squid Roger. Watching it dive into the water, Jiang Hai also restarted the engine and moved closer to his side of the dock. By the time his boat docked at the dock, Edward Anderson and the others had been waiting for a long time. Almost everyone except Lilia and Bernice was at the dock at this time to welcome Jiang Hai back. After going out for more than half a month, it was impossible to say that they didn't miss him, and they also had a lot of things to report to Jiang Hai. The group of people returned to Jiang Hai's villa in a lively manner, and in the villa, Bernice and Lilia were also there to prepare food. Although it was only morning, everyone had breakfast, and it wasn't time for lunch yet, but it was still good to prepare some snacks. When everyone sat down, Jiang Hai and the others began to give gifts. The best gift for a man is wine, because whether it's a cowboy or a fisherman, it's good to drink. The wine he bought was South American rum. This wine is really good for Jiang Hai to drink, otherwise he wouldn't have brought it back. 1 box for each person. Jiang Hai's gift is still very generous. As for the women, it's more local souvenirs and the like. Americans like to receive gifts. They don't care if the gifts are expensive or not. Holding the gifts from Jiang Hai and the others, they also can't put them down. After everyone was lively for a while, Jiang Hai announced that a party will be held in the square in front of his house in the evening, and they will have a good meal. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bert Dollar and Tommy Charles went to work. Harriman and Belle also went back to rest. Even Aphrodite and the others left, because now the grapes are ripe, their work is now the busiest time. In the end, only 3 people in charge were left in Jiang Hai's villa. Robbins Garcia is in charge of the manor ranch. Edward Anderson is in charge of the fish farm, and Dulles Gerard is in charge of the wine. The 3 of them have to report to Jiang Hai about the situation of the past few days. Robbins Garcia is the first to speak because the cows have been sold out. He has the least to do. The cows have been very calm recently, and they are growing well. The last time we concentrated on breeding, 378 cows became pregnant, and with the 986 pregnant cows we have now, it shouldn't be a problem for us to break through the 2,000 calves next year. However, the grass has been growing very fast recently. Should we start preparing to bring in new cows, or get some grass to make in a green stock? You can do as you see fit. If we want to buy cows, how many should we buy? Do we still need to recruit more people? Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai thought for a while and decided to delegate the power. He seems to know a lot about raising cows, but in fact, he was just observing. Compared to Robbins Garcia's experience, he was indeed not far behind. The manpower still depends on the cows because we work very well with those cattle dogs. If we follow the original plan and increase it to 25,000 cows, we don't need to increase the manpower, Robbins Garcia said with a smile as he looked at Jiang Hai. Okay then, let's increase it to 25,000 cows first. After August, September won't be so hot anymore, and we'll start preparing. Looking at Robbins Garcia in front of him, Jiang Hai also nodded. This amount of money was peanuts to him now. There are no problems with the fish farm these days. The main sales aspect is the tourists. Many of these tourists know about our seafood, and some of them didn't know at first, but after seeing others buy it, they joined the ranks of buying. During the days you were gone, we could sell an average of $13,720 of seafood every day. We earn a total of $219,520 these days. Seeing that Robbins Garcia had finished speaking, Edward Anderson reported to Jiang Hai. After all, this was the fish farm's first profit, and most importantly, they had sold more than $200,000 in half a month, $400,000 a month, and nearly $5 million a year, and this was only selling the leftovers. How much would the fish be sold for when they were out? Indeed, in Edward Anderson's eyes, lobsters, abalones, and sea cucumbers were all leftovers. Many of these things were not eaten by them, so naturally, they could not be sold for much in Winthrop. Not bad. Keep up the good work. When this month is over, you, Tommy, Eleanor, Andrew, and Marin will each receive a bonus of $20,000. This is what they deserve. Hearing that the business of selling the fishermen was so good, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then he said happily, he did not really care about $20,000 per person, but for Edward Anderson and the others, this was a huge sum of money. $20,000 a month and $240,000 a year. God, they had never even dared to think about it before. Robbins Garcia looked at him with envy, because when they were selling the cows, they had already received a bonus of $200,000 per person. They had earned no less than the fishermen. I think they'll be crazy with joy when they hear the news. Hearing that Jiang Hai had given them $20,000 each with a wave of his hand, Edward Anderson laughed until he was dizzy. He knew that he did not have to play any tricks in private, because Jiang Hai would definitely not treat them badly. This was also where his confidence came from. Sure enough, as he had expected, when Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, Andrew Christian, and Marlon Rupert found out about it in the evening, they were so happy that they gathered around and sang and danced. After arranging the manor and the fishery, the last person to speak was Dulles Gerard. "Boss, 30% of the grapes in the winery are ripe. These ripe grapes can already be used to make wine, or let them stay on the vine for a while. With the current sunshine, more than 90% of the grapes will be ripe. Should we start making wine now, or wait until then? What do you think?" Looking at Dulles Gerard in front of him, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and decided to ask this professional. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, Dulles Gerard almost gritted his teeth and said, "I mean, bear with it." In Jiang Hai's manner, there were two main economic lifelines. One was the ranch, and the other was the fishing ground. This was inevitable, although Dulles Gerard usually pretended to be indifferent, as if he was a noble and disdained to mix with cowboys and fishermen. In fact, he came here mainly to make money. This was inevitable. He was still very confident about this. On the first day he came here, he felt that this winery, in his hands, could make at least $8 million a year. This was the pure profit after excluding all the labor, sales, and so on. In his view, this was already a very profitable business, but these days he was beaten black and blue. The cows raised by the seemingly inconspicuous cowboys could be sold for $150,000. What kind of cow was this? Was it a beef cow? It was a Taurus. At that time, the Japanese Taurus King was sold for 22 million yen, which was equivalent to more than $60,000 now. That was already a sky-high price, so high that it alarmed the Japanese emperor and made the emperor ban the sale of this kind of cow. And Jiang Hai was now selling a cow for $150,000. It was really a cow made of gold. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so expensive. And the fishery over there, it seemed to be inconspicuous. Just by casually picking up the leftovers, it could make $5 million a year. If those big fish were mature, how much would they sell for? Just thinking about it made his scalp tingle. So in the end, the old man panicked a little. In order to prove himself, and for the winery, he was really anxious to make money. But his professionalism told him to endure it. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai didn't care. He didn't mind his subordinates competing with each other to make money, because in the end, he would be the one to benefit. But he minded the bad competition between his subordinates. The things were clearly not ripe and not grown well, but they were directly sold for money. The profits were not maximized, and this was what Jiang Hai couldn't stand the most. Fine work comes out of slow work. I believe in your old craftsmanship. Everything will be done according to your wishes. Looking at Dulles Gerard's slightly tangled gaze, Jiang Hai smiled. He wanted such a professional person in charge. As you wish. Hearing that Jiang Hai had given him the greatest authority, Dulles Gerard was also very touched. It seemed that Jiang Hai was indeed a very good boss, a guy who was worth working for. Chapter 506. Conrad, you can leave the hospital now. In the ward of Boston's Massachusetts General Hospital, a nurse spoke in a sharp voice to the big man who was packing up. This hospital was famous. There were only 3 famous hospitals in Boston. Of course, some small clinics or private hospitals were not included in this list. The 3 most famous ones were Massachusetts General Hospital, Dana-Farber Cancer Center, and Boston Children's Hospital. Among them, Massachusetts General Hospital was the second most comprehensive hospital in the United States. Dana-Farber Cancer Center was the 4th most specialized cancer hospital in the United States. Boston Children's Hospital was the top pediatric hospital in the United States. Of course, this ranking was there for all to see. The prices of the healers were also quite famous. "Oh, thank you." Hearing the nurse's words, the big man who was packing up said in a low voice, "Papaya." Looking at the guy's appearance, the nurse couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Then, she swayed her big butt and left. The hospital was just like the entertainment industry. Sometimes it was really hard to see the light, especially when it came to private life. Of course, this was not absolute. There were good people everywhere, but bad people still accounted for the majority. It was the same in the hospital. In the domestic medical system, private life was very messy. It was even more so in foreign hospitals. The United States was a very open country. Thinking about the contents of so many FBI warnings, which were all related to hospitals, it could be roughly understood. Although Massachusetts General Hospital was the second best hospital in the United States, the nurses here were obviously unwilling to be left out. Conrad was more than 2 meters tall and had a body full of muscles. He was treated with the best medicine and lived in the best room. Naturally, he was targeted by many female nurses. However, this guy seemed to be born without love for women. He didn't seem to understand the explicit hints of these women and kept playing dumb. At first, these female nurses were very patient, but later, their attitudes slowly changed. They either ignored him or acted like they did just now. However, these attitudes couldn't change his character. His character was like this. Conrad took his things and left the hospital. As soon as he walked to the door, he saw a police car parked there. "Get in the car." Looking at the police car in front of him, Conrad was a little hesitant. In the end, he went around it and prepared to leave, but the person sitting in the car didn't let him go. Instead, he took the initiative to open the door of the passenger's seat and said to him. Hearing this person's words, Conrad couldn't help but glance at this guy. He hesitated for a while before getting into the car. "Where are you going? I'll give you a ride." Watching Conrad get in the car, the driver said with a smile. If Jiang Hai were here, he would definitely recognize this person. He had met this person before. This person was called Doyle George. When the Gray Gang in Boston attacked him, this guy had fought side by side with him. However, it was just as Jiang Hai thought. This guy was a gold-plated person, relying on the heroic battle he had fought in the past. He was then transferred back to Boston and became a sheriff. The United States was different from Huaxia. There was no division chief or section chief in the police department. The police ranks here were only divided into police officer, sergeant, superintendent, sheriff, superintendent, and other positions. Of course, each state had different laws, and naturally, the names were different, but the meaning was similar. The position of a sheriff was basically the same as the power of the director of some domestic police stations. If it was in a big city like Boston, it would be similar to the power of the director of a local police station. This also proved how strong Doyle George was. Of course, it referred to the strength of his family. As for him and Conrad, it was mainly because of the battle with Jiang Hai. In that battle, Conrad was shot many times. After a simple treatment by Bernice, he was sent to the hospital. Doyle George also went to the hospital and happened to know this guy. After knowing that he had betrayed Jiang Hai at the last moment, and that was why Conrad's men didn't become hostages, Doyle became interested in him. Gradually, he came to see Conrad. After the two met a few times, not only did they become friends, but they were also very close to each other. Of course, the money for Conrad's treatment was paid for by Jiang Hai. He didn't care about the tens of thousands of dollars, but Doyle George helped him get discharged from the hospital. He also knew about this guy's history. He used to be an underground boxer, which made him want to recruit him into his police force. This was also one of the reasons why he was here. "Thank you." Hearing Doyle George's words, Conrad didn't say the specific location, but just said in a muffled voice, "You don't have to thank me. You don't have to thank me. It was Jiang Hai who paid you, but you still have to be careful in the future. You can't just trust anyone." Hearing his words, Doyle, who had been with him for a long time, naturally knew what he meant. He smiled and said, "Jiang Hai, benefactor, please take me to Jiang Hai." Hearing his words, Conrad was stunned for a moment. Then his gaze became more determined. He originally came to Boston to look for Jiang Hai, but due to a freak combination of factors, he became Jiang Hai's enemy and entered the Gray Gang, almost killing Jiang Hai. And Jiang Hai actually paid for his treatment. In his opinion, he owed Jiang Hai 2 lives. Okay. Upon hearing his words, Doyle couldn't help but chuckle helplessly. However, he knew that this was Constance's habit, so he didn't say much. Instead, he turned the steering wheel and drove towards Winthrop's position. As for Jiang Hai's home in Winthrop, the atmosphere was a bit solemn. Of course, the main solemn ones were Jiang Hai and Bernice. The other three were just implicated. I found that you've been getting more and more out of control recently. Are you infected with some rich boy's habits? Can't you just stay at home for a few days? You've only been out for half a month, and you've only been back for 3 days, and now you're leaving again? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was eating steak, Bernice put down the knife and fork in her hand and said with a frown, "Haha, this time I'm really going to discuss business. I'll be back in 3 days at most, at least 2 days." Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. In fact, to be honest, if it weren't for the billion, he would be too lazy to go. People who were familiar with Jiang Hai knew that this person was actually very lazy. He liked the kind of monotonous life. He had no interest in the pursuit of excitement, the pursuit of individuality, the search for the warmest place in his heart, and the like. He was not a rich young man, nor was he an artistic young man. His artistic style was not that heavy. Jiang Hai could be summarized as greedy, lecherous, afraid of death, selfish, aggressive, unsympathetic, and without any ideals. It could be said that he was just the most ordinary person among all living beings. With great power came great responsibility. What benefiting the world? What making the earth evolve and advance? What the hell? He was not interested at all. He just wanted to make himself more comfortable, safer, and more enjoyable. This was his purpose. Of course, he also had a bottom line. Other than that, he was just an ordinary young man in society. He was not a genius. He had no ambition. And from the beginning to the end, he did not have any clear goals. Therefore, his sense of immersion was quite strong. The only difference was that he had a Dragon Ball in his body. That was all. Other than that, he was no different from an ordinary young man. People were afraid of losing. In the past, Jiang Hai did not have anything to lose. The only thing he could lose was his life. Therefore, even ants would drag out their lives, let alone Jiang Hai. Therefore, in the past, Jiang Hai was also afraid of death. However, he estimated that no one would harm him, and now he was also afraid of death because others had a reason to harm him. His manner, his money, and his identity were all extremely sensitive. Therefore, in addition to bringing bodyguards, he also needed some official things to protect himself. He would speak according to the country he was in. If he was in China, the best way to protect himself would be to contact the higher-ups and make friends with some second-generation officials or third-generation officials. Naturally, he would be able to live a good life. But in the United States, being a government official was useless because the Americans didn't care about government officials at all. If you wanted to survive in the United States, the most important thing was money. In this capitalist society, only money was recognized, not people. Most importantly, just having money wasn't enough because there were people who were richer than you. You had to have something that could save your life, such as oil futures. This was also one of the reasons why Jiang Hai was so careful. He was afraid of death. It was that simple. Forget it. I can't control you. You don't have to explain to me. I'm not related to you. You can do as you see fit. She didn't know why, but when Bernice heard that Jiang Hai was going to leave, she couldn't help but feel annoyed. But on second thought, what was there to be annoyed about? She was not related to him, so what was there to be annoyed about? So after hesitating for a moment, she said directly, then lowered her head to eat the steak in front of her. Seeing that she did not speak, Jiang Hai also glanced at her carefully. He muttered in his heart, "Is this girl on her period? Why is she so impulsive? When she heard that I was leaving, it was as if she wanted to eat me. Is there a mistake?" Just as Jiang Hai was muttering there, the doorbell outside rang. Chapter 507. Hearing the doorbell, Jiang Hai was stunned. He walked to the door and picked it up. There were 2 people standing outside the door. Jiang Hai was familiar with them. One was Doyle George. After all, he had fought side by side with Jiang Hai. After that incident, Doyle was transferred to the Boston Police Department and became sheriff. He was directly promoted with seniority. It seemed that his family was at least very powerful in the police field. Jiang Hai also had some impression of the other person. He was a big guy. Jiang Hai had seen him 3 times. The first time was in an underground boxing match in Miami. At that time, he beat someone to death and was seriously injured. The second time was on the streets of Miami. He found him interesting, so he invited him to eat a hamburger. At the same time, there was a car accident. Of course, 70% of the treatment fee for this big guy was paid by Zhang Heng. The 4 girls who hit him didn't have much money. Their families could only pay for the basic treatment. The follow-up health care and other expenses, such as the treatment of his original internal injuries, were all paid by Jiang Hai. The third time they met was in his villa. This guy was Jiang Hai's enemy, but for some reason, he betrayed him at the last moment. He saved Alina and the others, giving them time to release Azalina and deal with the invaders. Then he was sent to the hospital. Although Jiang Hai couldn't wait to kill all those who invaded his home, this guy helped him a lot. But after all, this guy had helped him, so Jiang Hai didn't find trouble with him. Instead, he cured him. But now, seeing them come, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What are they doing here? Are they thanking me? This was the most likely reason, but Jiang Hai really didn't know the specifics. Hey Doyle, how come you have time to come here? Looking at the 2 people on the other side of the phone, since he couldn't figure it out, he might as well ask directly. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who liked to keep things to himself. Hey man, you're right. I'm very busy. This time I'm mainly here to accompany this big guy. Open the door first, let's go in and talk. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George said with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai didn't doubt him. He opened the door directly and waited for the 2 in front of the villa. After the door was opened, the 2 returned to the car and then drove into Jiang Hai's manor. After parking the car in the parking lot, the 2 also walked out. Looking at Jiang Hai standing at the door, Conrad couldn't help trembling. He had spent a lot of effort to find Jiang Hai, but fortunately, he finally found him. Come in, benefactor. Seeing the 2 coming, Jiang Hai also took a few steps forward and greeted the 2 of them. But before he finished speaking, Conrad had already taken a few big steps to the front of the villa, knelt in front of Jiang Hai, and kowtowed heavily to Jiang Hai. After all, this is a concrete floor. As soon as his head touched the ground, it made a banging sound, but Jiang Hai was startled. He immediately jumped down and supported Knursen Peters, who was still kowtowing. What's going on? He didn't understand. Benefactor, do you still remember me? I heard that in Huaxia, you have to express your gratitude in this way. Looking at Jiang Hai, Conrad said in a muffled voice. Although his brain is not working properly, he is not stupid. At least he can still speak clearly. You don't have to do this. Really get up quickly. Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile when he felt this guy's immense strength and wanted to kowtow. He had to admit that this guy's strength was quite strong. Judging from Jiang Hai's actions, this guy's strength should be very close to the limit of human strength. But compared to Jiang Hai, he was still far from Jiang Hai's strength, which was 4 times the limit of human strength. Therefore, under Conrad's surprised gaze, Jiang Hai directly lifted him up, which made Conrad extremely surprised. He had never experienced someone being able to lift him up directly in his life. At this moment, he looked at Jiang Hai with a burning gaze. He only admired one kind of person in his life, and that was those who were stronger than him. Jiang Hai had saved his life and was stronger than him. Thinking of this, in Conrad's simple heart, Jiang Hai had already become his benefactor and an object of worship. Who the hell is this? He's so heavy. How can you lift him up? I'm really starting to doubt your genes, brother. Are you a humanoid Tyrannosaurus Rex? Or an alien? Say, what are you doing on Earth? Are you preparing to invade Earth? Seeing Jiang Hai actually lifting Conrad up, Doyle George, who was walking over, could not help but be stunned for a moment. Then he said in surprise, F.A., the purpose of my visit to Earth is to settle things with your sister. After helping Conrad stand up, Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at Doyle. After spitting out the word F, he looked at Doyle and said in a mocking tone, Unfortunately, I don't have a sister. If I did, I would definitely let her marry you. Being targeted by a billionaire, such a wonderful thing must be a great thing for her. Unfortunately, in an open country like the United States, such jokes were not taken seriously by the Americans. Instead, Doyle used this sentence to make fun of him. I can't be bothered with you. Let's go in first." Ignoring this guy's sultry look, Jiang Hai waved his hand and led the two into his villa. But the moment Conrad stepped into the villa, Azalina, who was cutting the steak, little Huang and Xiao Bai, who were playing in the distance, as well as Dai and Chirpy, were all shocked. They looked at Conrad with vigilant expressions. In particular, little Huang and Xiao Bai were no longer playing. Instead, they slowly leaned over and stared at Conrad with a pair of wolf-like eyes. Animals were extremely sensitive to murderous aura. No matter how much blood a person had on his hands, no matter how ruthless he was, as long as he had not killed anyone, it was only a murderous aura, not a murderous aura. Only when a person had truly been stained with human life would it be a murderous aura. For example, some boxers or martial artists made a career out of beating people up every day. Their hands were stained with the blood of their enemies, as well as their own. This made them fearless and ruthless when they fought. However, everyone knew that they would act appropriately and would not kill anyone. Thus, there was no such thing as murderous aura, but a ruthless murderous aura. However, some people who had been stained with human life were completely different. They had really killed people. When others fought with them, they would be afraid because they knew that if they lost, they would die. Thus, they would lose their composure. This was also why those perverted murderers in the wanted posters were usually gentle and did not look like such people at all. It was hard to imagine how their hands were stained with so many human lives. Knerson Peters was an underground boxer. He had been boxing for more than 10 years. He had been boxing since he was 14 years old. This year, he was already 29 years old. He was even 1 year older than Jiang Hai. In 15 years, he had fought a total of 34 boxing matches and won all 34 matches. This was because if he lost a match, he would be abandoned. Even if the opponent did not beat him to death, he would be beaten to death by the boss. Therefore, among these underground boxers who had been stained with human life, everyone had a murderous aura. It was also because of this murderous aura that he was targeted as soon as he walked in. Animals were extremely sensitive to murderous aura. As for Azalina, it was because of her profession. Don't forget what she used to do. Naturally, she had received special training. Although she had not done this training for a long time, she found someone who had the same murderous aura as her. Her intuition could not be wrong. But the difference between her and Conrad was that she could control and release it freely, while he could not. However, even though they could feel it, they didn't move. This was because they could also feel that his murderous aura was only consciously released from his body. This meant that he didn't have any murderous intent towards Jiang Hai and these people. Have you eaten? You can have a bite here. In the United States, very few people would invite others to eat at their home. In the United States, there was rarely such a thing. Treating guests to a meal was treating guests to a meal. There was no such thing as a home-cooked meal. Therefore, in the United States, it was rare to see people in other people's homes at noon or in the evening, unless they said that they wanted to treat you to a meal. However, Jiang Hai was not an American. According to the saying of Huaxia people, since they were here, they should eat together. For Jiang Hai's words, Doyle was somewhat not used to it, but he also knew that Jiang Hai was not just being polite, so he did not be too polite. He directly sat at the table, and Conrad also sat there. After Jiang Hai brought them new tableware, he no longer cared about them and started to eat. As for Doyle and Conrad, they also started to eat steaks, but when they had their first bite, their eyes couldn't help but brighten. Conrad only knew that this steak was delicious. But Doyle knew that this steak was not ordinary. Today's steak was not made by Jiang Hai, but by Xiaoya. During the days when Jiang Hai and the others were away, she also studied Western food, although her cooking was still far inferior to those Western chefs. But compared to Jiang Hai, it was already heaven and earth. For Jiang Hai's beef, she naturally knew that it was excellent. If she let Jiang Hai continue to cook like this, it would really be a waste, so now she was also trying to save these steaks. Looking at the two eating without caring about their image, Jiang Hai secretly scolded country bumpkins in his heart. But after thinking about it, this also proved that his beef was really good. Thinking about it, he still felt a little happy. Eat more if you like. I don't have much other things, but this is a game. Chapter 508. Upon hearing Zhang Hai's words, Doyle George said without raising his head, "Of course, I won't stand on ceremony. You're a tycoon." But Conrad, who was beside him, was stunned for a moment, and then put down the fork in his hand. "What's wrong? Not to your liking?" Looking at him, Zhang Hai was taken aback for a moment, and then asked him, "No, it's delicious. It's really delicious, but I'm not here to eat steak. Mr. Zhang Hai, you've begged me twice. I, Conrad, don't have much money, nor do I have any ability. I only have a body that isn't afraid of hardship, so I want to repay you." Looking at Zhang Hai, Conrad said in a muffled voice. But as soon as his voice fell, the people at the table couldn't help but stop what they were doing. In particular, Bernice looked at Conrad in surprise, and then at Zhang Hai. That look made Zhang Hai quite speechless. But at this time, Zhang Hai didn't have the leisure to care about her, because after Conrad's voice fell, he couldn't help but feel his chrysanthemum tighten. Is this big guy interested in me? Even if he wants to repay me with his body, it has to be a beautiful woman. What's this? After a few seconds of silence, Zhang Hai said with a smile, I'm a person who doesn't ask for anything in return. No, it's up to you to decide whether you want to accept my gratitude, but it's up to me to decide whether I want to repay it." But Conrad's brain wasn't very good to begin with, so how could he understand this now? He said to Zhang Hai with a serious face, "But I really don't need it." Looking at Conrad, Zhang Hai immediately said. At this time, he didn't care whether he would hurt his feelings or not. Zhang Hai had no interest in men. He was a straight man who was harder than steel until he had no friends. Zhang Hai, I think you might have misunderstood what Conrad meant. He doesn't seem to have such thoughts in his mind. He doesn't seem to be interested in men or women. You should know what I'm talking about. When he said that he wanted to repay the debt of gratitude, he seemed to mean it literally. Looking at the determined look on Zhang Hai's face and the fact that Zhang Hai was too anxious to speak, Doyle George couldn't help but wipe the sweat off his forehead. Fortunately, he had interacted with Conrad many times, so he was the only one who could speak clearly now. Upon hearing what he said, Zhang Hai couldn't help but open his mouth, not knowing what to say. Sigh, someone's thoughts are really dirty. Just when Zhang Hai was feeling a little embarrassed, Bernice also picked up a piece of steak and ate it while speaking proudly. She didn't know who had such a big reaction just now. Dirty my foot. But then again, I really don't need him to repay any debt of gratitude. Scratching his head, Zhang Hai looked at the big guy in front of him speechlessly. If Azalina hadn't appeared, he would have been a very good bodyguard. But now that Azalina and Bale were around, Zhang Hai didn't need him to be a bodyguard anymore. Moreover, the most important thing is that he doesn't know how to herd animals or catch fish. What use does Zhang Hai have for him? After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Doyle actually understood that Zhang Hai had no use for him. Sigh, I think you probably know a little about his situation. Instead of letting him go out and be used by bad people and die out there, it's better to let him follow you. You're a billionaire now, so you should at least have a bodyguard by your side, right? However, since he and Conrad were acquaintances, it was impossible for him to watch Conrad go down the wrong path again. With Zhang Hai around, he felt relieved. Bodyguard? Okay. Looking at Conrad's anxious look, Zhang Hai thought for a moment, then looked at Azalina. When Azalina nodded, Zhang Hai nodded in acknowledgement of his existence. Thank you, benefactor. I'll do my best to protect you. Seeing that Zhang Hai had agreed, Conrad also stood up excitedly. For him, it was absolutely impossible to not repay a debt of gratitude. Being a bodyguard by Zhang Hai's side was definitely a very good thing for him. As for Doyle George, he could now rest assured. The reason why Zhang Hai accepted him as a bodyguard was actually that he had some ideas. Sometimes, there were some things that Azalina was a woman, after all, and it was not easy for her to do. For example, deterrence. Who was more deterrent, a woman who looked about 8 meters tall and capable, or a man who was more than 2 meters tall, strong, fierce, and exuding a murderous aura? Just like what Zhang Hai had said before, He was very afraid of trouble, but if he had a beautiful woman by his side, there might be some idiots who would come for him. However, if he had such a guy by his side, he could probably scare off more than 95% of his enemies. This would have the effect of subduing the enemy without a fight. Jiang Hai was not the kind of person who would take pleasure in trampling on others, although it was indeed a very satisfying thing to trample on others sometimes. However, this matter also depended on the situation. It was very interesting in the early stages, but with Jiang Hai's current strength, if there were any idiots who came looking for trouble, then they would not be trampling on others, but on the brain. As his level increased, the people he wanted to trample on would naturally also increase in level. As for Azalina, she had naturally received Jiang Hai's message, and in fact, she thought so too. With such a strong, deterrent, and simple-minded person who is absolutely loyal to Jiang Hai, it would be a lot easier for her. Besides, Jiang Hai now had a net worth of billions. It was indeed a little difficult to have only one bodyguard, but with this guy, it would be much easier. Since he had agreed to accept him as a bodyguard, Jiang Hai would give him an official identity. After lunch, Jiang Hai called Moses Adams and asked him to prepare a bodyguard contract. The bodyguard contract was the same as Azalina's, but there were some differences because Conrad's salary was less than hers. However, Conrad didn't care. In any case, as long as he had food to eat and clothes to wear, he didn't have any concept of money. Jiang Hai gave him a salary of $1,000 a week. Apart from emissions, his base salary for a year was $52,000. Most importantly, he didn't need to pay taxes. Jiang Hai would pay all the taxes, including food, accommodation, and equipment. When he heard Jiang Hai's salary, to be honest, Doyle even wanted to come over and be Jiang Hai's bodyguard. But unfortunately, even if he came over, Jiang Hai wouldn't want him. What ability did he have to eat and wait for death at Jiang Hai's place? The contract was in triplicate and was delivered by Penelope Dahl in the afternoon. This was the first time Jiang Hai saw Penelope Dahl since he came back from Huaxia. But at this time, she didn't seem to have anything to say to Jiang Hai. After delivering the contract and watching Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters sign their names, she went to find her father. This made Jiang Hai feel a little embarrassed. Just now, he greeted her warmly, but in the end, he only got an N. Serves you right. Seeing Jiang Hai eat a turtle, Bernice was very happy and said softly with a smile on her face. Jiang Hai looked at Penelope as she left. He didn't want to disturb her conversation with her father. After all, the misunderstanding between her and her father had only been resolved recently. Actually, it wasn't that Jiang Hai said anything. If it wasn't for the fact that she saw that her father could really earn money from her, she probably wouldn't have bothered with her father. But you could say that she was realistic. She returned the money her father gave her, intact. Jiang Hai didn't know what to say to her, so he could only not be a third wheel. Therefore, after thinking about it for a while, he realized that Connor's son didn't have a place to stay, so he went to find a place for Connor's son to stay. In fact, it was reasonable to say that a bodyguard should live in the same building as Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai's side was full of women except for him. It was indeed a little inconvenient, so although there were many empty rooms, Jiang Hai didn't let him live here. Jiang Hai's family had a lot of villas for workers. When these villas were first built, the previous owner probably built them with full ranches, full fishing grounds, and full wineries. But he didn't think that Jiang Hai was a little too generous. Logically speaking, a villa had 3 rooms, so 3 people should live in it. As for the wives of the cowboy and the fisherman, they lived separately. Even if they lived together, they lived in one room. But Jiang Hai was different. He divided them according to family. So now there was not a single empty house. In this case, they could only squeeze in. The person Jiang Hai chose was none other than Harriman Fells, because in his manner, he was probably the easiest person to talk to. Sure enough, when Jiang Hai told Harriman Fells about this matter, Harriman happily agreed. He and Conrad were actually the same kind of people. Their brains were a bit slow, but they were tall, exceptionally powerful, and their strength was not small. It was just that their lives were completely different. Conrad was cheated by his friend and went to fight in the underground boxing ring for more than 10 years. In the end, he didn't leave a penny. He was only left with a body full of injuries and terrifying combat power. But Jiang Hai didn't care about these injuries, because his spiritual energy could easily heal those internal injuries. And Harriman, with the help of many kind neighbors, lived peacefully in Winthrop as a cowboy. And he met Jiang Hai, a good boss, so their experiences were completely different. But now that the two of them met, they really felt a little regretful that they hadn't met earlier. Looking at the two who were very satisfied, Jiang Hai was also very satisfied. Standing in front of them, Jiang Hai looked at them. When the two of them stood together, their aura was really a little scary. The two men were more than 2 meters tall, and their bodies were abnormally huge. One of them exercised all year round, and the other herded cows all year round. Their muscles were not small. If they put on a straight face, shave their heads, get some tattoos, wear a black suit, and wear sunglasses, TSK, it would be very cool just thinking about it. In case Jiang Hai went out to negotiate or something in the future, he could definitely bring these two people with him. They could definitely scare a group of people. After settling Conrad down, Jiang Hai returned to his villa. He laid down on the white jade bed and began to think about his next move. Chapter 509. How are you doing here? Lying on a recliner made of jade, Jiang Hai wore sunglasses and looked at the sun in the sky while asking Conrad, who was practicing beside him. Very good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Conrad, who was doing push-ups with all his might, replied in a muffled voice, then continued to train, allowing sweat to drip from his body. Are you having a good time with Harriman? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai continued to ask. Very good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Conrad was still doing his push-ups and continued to say, How are you getting along with the others? Seeing that he still said the same 2 words, Jiang Hai continued to lie there and asked him. Very good. But unfortunately, the answer to Jiang Hai was still the same 2 words. Hey, can't you say something else? Sitting up helplessly, Jiang Hai raised the sunglasses on his face and looked at Conrad helplessly. Does this guy have no other words other than saying very good? Not bad. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Conrad hesitated for a moment and changed from very good to another word. T-Sich, waving his hand at him, Jiang Hai continued to lie down. It's very comfortable to bask in the sun here. Today is August 22nd, and it's also the 5th day since Conrad came to Jiang Hai's house. These days, Conrad was still a little reserved when he first came. Basically, he would come to Jiang Hai's villa when he got up in the morning. Wherever Jiang Hai went, he would follow. According to him, he is Jiang Hai's bodyguard. So naturally, he should go wherever Jiang Hai goes, but Jiang Hai is not going to take such a guy with him. So on the 3rd day, Jiang Hai told him that he doesn't need to follow him, and he could do whatever he wants. But he really has nothing to do. After inadvertently seeing the training room in Jiang Hai's villa that is not used except for storms, he told Jiang Hai that he wanted to borrow those training equipment. Jiang Hai naturally had no problem with this. He was happy that this guy didn't follow him, so he immediately lent it all out. He even took the initiative to drive him to the town to pick out a few sets of sportswear. Of course, they were all Nike because these things were not expensive here. According to Jiang Hai, he wanted to let him use the equipment here directly. But Conrad was unwilling. He only took a series of things such as sandbags and dumbbells and moved them to the lawn of the villa. Then he began to practice there. Next to this place was originally the place where Jiang Hai usually basked in the sun. That is, the place where Bernice likes to snatch Jiang Hai's place, but in the next few months, she will not snatch Jiang Hai's place. Because the sun has been too strong recently. Although she also likes to bask in the sun, she is not going to get tanned. So in these 2 days, Conrad no longer followed Jiang Hai, but when Jiang Hai is basking in the sun here, there is always a fierce man training beside him, which makes Jiang Hai a little dumbfounded. But no matter what, he is adapting to everything. Jiang Hai estimated that it is difficult to change this guy's mind. Since he can't change him, he can only let himself adapt. Jiang Hai, aren't you leaving tomorrow? Aren't you going to prepare some luggage or something? Looking at Jiang Hai's leisurely appearance, Bernice, who had just picked some fresh vegetables from the vegetable garden at this time, said with some dissatisfaction. Bernice seems to like staying in Zhanghai's manor more and more recently. She gave up such a big research institute in Miami and just stayed here with Zhanghai. Of course, Zhanghai doesn't care whether she stays here or not. Recently, little Ya's condition has further improved. Although her appearance is still the same, without a trace of blood like a vampire, she can bask in the sun in the room all day long. Even in the morning and evening, Bernice has allowed her to go out, but from 10 o'clock in the morning, she will be grounded until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. These 6 hours are unshakable, and she needs to slowly adapt. But for little Ya, this is already great news. It is precisely because she doesn't have to always look after little Ya that Bernice also walks around the manor all day long. Everyone knows her, and everyone also knows that this woman and Zhanghai have some unclear relationship. And most importantly, whether it is Delina, Marion, or Aphrodite, they're all a little afraid of her. These people who are close to Zhanghai don't dare to provoke. The fishermen and cowboys naturally don't dare to provoke them. Even Dulles and his apprentice are respectful to Bernice. Of course, they are more wary of her identity as a doctor. In the United States, the professional status of a doctor is still very high, very high. And this Bernice doesn't know what's wrong with her, but when she saw Zhanghai lazily sitting there, she couldn't help but get angry. Hey, what's there to pack up? I'm just going for 2 or 3 days. It's not good to let others wait for me on the same day. They are royalty, right? Then I'll do something the next day, and if there's a banquet in the evening, I'll come back on the 3rd day. If there's no banquet, I'll come back directly. Zhanghai lazily glanced at Bernice and said in a very tired voice, "It's really unbearable. If there's nothing, why don't you go to town and take a look? These tour groups were brought here by you. Aren't you worried about any disputes? Why don't you go and see the income of your shooting range? Why don't you go and see the income of your villas?" Seeing that Zhanghai is still half dead, Bernice began to talk with money. But unfortunately, Bernice's words have no meaning. Who told Zhanghai not care about money at all? Hey, what's yours is yours. Don't force it if it's not yours. If I go, won't the disputes still happen? Moses Adams sent people to watch the villas and the shooting range. I'm not a professional. Why should I watch? Glancing at Bernice, Zhanghai still said slowly. Listening to his words, she really wants to kick him. Who cares if you die? Looking at Zhanghai's appearance, Bernice glared at him and walked into the villa. Hearing her words, Zhanghai also changed his position to lie down, but just as he lay down, he saw Conrad's big face. What? Seeing his big face, Zhanghai was shocked, so he immediately asked him, "Boss, if you want to go to Atlantic City, I'll go with you." Looking at Zhanghai, it was obvious that Conrad's expression was not very clear. Zhanghai listened to his words and couldn't help but smile. If it weren't for the 5 days of contact, he probably would have thought that this was a confession. "No need. You stay at home and look after the house." With a wave of his hand, Zhanghai directly ordered, "But I'm your bodyguard." Looking at Zhanghai, Conrad said with a serious face, "Protecting Zhanghai is his duty." I said no need, so there's no need. Why don't we try a fight? Hearing Conrad's words, Zhanghai raised his eyebrows and said with a serious face, "Since he can't talk to him, then he'll use his fist to make him understand this truth. Fight!" Hearing Zhanghai's words, Conrad also looked at Zhanghai strangely. What does this sentence mean? That's right, let's fight. How about this? Let's fight. If I win, you'll have to listen to me in the future. You're my bodyguard, right? You'll do whatever I tell you to do. If you win, then you can do whatever you want. Looking at the puzzled Conrad in front of him, Zhanghai suddenly sat up and said excitedly, "Really? Then I can go to Atlantic City with you?" Hearing Zhanghai's words, Conrad was also very excited. His big eyes shone with a fierce light. To be honest, the reason he went to the underground boxing scene was partly because he was cheated by his friends and partly because he really liked to fight. Of course, he would still hold back his strength when fighting with Zhanghai, but it didn't mean that he would give up fighting. Of course, it's true. As soon as Zhanghai's voice fell, Conrad's big hand came slapping over. On August 23rd, On the road from Boston to New York, Jiang Hai drove his combat spirit. He wore sunglasses and whistled. Feeling the empty car, he couldn't help but sing along with the music on the radio. At this time, in Jiang Hai's manner, Conrad was training hard, but in addition to the muscles on his body, there were some purplish bruises, which also represented the results of his fight with Jiang Hai yesterday. To be honest, when Conrad fought with Jiang Hai, it really scared Jiang Hai at first. After all, this guy had killed people, and that murderous aura was real. Although Jiang Hai had killed people before, it was all in self-defense, and he had never taken the initiative to attack. Therefore, at first, he was really intimidated by this murderous aura and took a few punches seriously. But then his physical fitness that was 4 times that of an ordinary person, in addition to his powerful combat power, broke out here. No matter how strong Conrad was, he was just an ordinary person. How could he be a match for Jiang Hai, a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus Rex? In the end, he was beaten up by Jiang Hai. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai was here now, and why he was at home. I'm looking afar, on the moon. How many dreams are flying freely? Jiang Hai sang like this. The car passed through Boston, New York, entered New Jersey, and arrived in Atlantic City. Last time, Jiang Hai came in a hurry and left in an even more hurry, so he didn't have time to appreciate the situation of the second largest gambling city in the United States. This time, he wasn't going to leave like last time. As for Prawalton, it was better not to see it if possible. Bam! Just as Jiang Hai was playing and singing along the way, preparing to enjoy the scenery of the gambling city tonight, a car suddenly stopped in the opposite lane, then changed direction and stopped directly in front of Jiang Hai. Chapter 510. F***CK, what's the situation? Jiang Hai stepped on the brakes. The quality of Jiang Hai's shield was good. Although he stepped on the brakes, the braking was still quite good. He only slid forward a few meters before coming to a stop, but this shook him a lot. He opened the door with some doubts, and Jiang Hai stretched his head out. In broad daylight, on the road, is there someone who wants to deal with me? Is this person too stupid? Here, the police can come here in less than a minute. What the hell is this? Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, 3 people came down from the opposite car. When he saw these 3 people, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, a trace of embarrassment flashed across his face. Because these 3 people, to be exact, he knew them. Ugh, hi Pra, how did I meet you here? Yes, the person who came out of the car at this time was not someone else. It was Prawalton and the other 2 women, Cheryl Lee and Barbara Martina, who had sex with Jiang Hai that day. When these 3 women came out, Jiang Hai subconsciously knew that the situation might not be good. Not bad. You still remember me. Come out. Walking to the front of Jiang Hai's car door, Prawalton looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. Then, without giving Jiang Hai a chance to resist, she directly opened his driver's door from the inside, and then pulled Jiang Hai out. Of course, Jiang Hai was afraid of hurting her. Otherwise, with her little strength, how could she pull Jiang Hai? Hey, what are you doing? Looking at her rough actions, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little stunned. What's the situation? You still have the nerve to ask me what I'm doing? You will know in a while. You 2 go and drive. Let's go back. Glancing at the panicked Jiang Hai, Prawalton directly opened the back door of Jiang Hai's car, threw Jiang Hai in, and said to the 2 women behind her. The 2 women naturally knew what Prawalton meant, so one got in their own car, and the other got in Jiang Hai's car. The car started again and went to Prawalton's home in Atlantic City. Hey, I still have something to do. Hurry up. Feeling the car driving away, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. He wanted to explain something, but before he finished speaking, Prawalton's mouth had already kissed Jiang Hai's mouth. The tongue flexibly invaded Jiang Hai's mouth. Although Prawalton had little experience in this area, she was much more familiar with kissing and touching than Jiang Hai. After all, there were so many girls for her to train. For a while, Jiang Hai didn't dare to move. He was afraid of hurting Prawalton, but he was so passive that he didn't know what to do. Well, it tastes good. Cheryl, it really has a completely different feeling from you. The smell of sweat on the man's body is quite good after smelling it for a long time. Prawalton raised her head again. There was still a trace of transparent liquid on her and Jiang Hai's lips, but she didn't care. After saying something to Cheryl, who was driving, she kissed Jiang Hai under his surprised gaze. The two communicated with each other for about 10 minutes before Prawalton panted and left. "Hey," I said, "is that enough?" Jiang Hai said speechlessly after wiping his mouth full of saliva. "Enough? How is that possible? Do you think it's possible without a real fight?" Narrowing her eyes, Prawalton slowly climbed onto Jiang Hai's body. She looked at Jiang Hai with narrowed eyes and smiled. Then she grabbed Jiang Hai's weapon. With this grab, Jiang Hai couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This woman wouldn't want to waste him, right? Just as Jiang Hai was about to resist, even if it meant hurting her, Prawalton suddenly released his weapon and then bent down clumsily. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little confused and a little panicked. He looked at the cars that kept passing by outside the window. To be honest, it wasn't that he hadn't done it in the car before. For example, he had done it with Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yinshin when they were together, but they chose some more remote and quiet places. It was his first time driving while on the road. The feeling of excitement and shyness came together, and it seemed to make Jiang Hai's desire to fight stronger. At this time, Prawalton, who felt that Jiang Hai was different, also raised her head and squatted there with a smile. She took off her black dress from the bottom to the top. In an instant, her naked body appeared in front of Jiang Hai. It seems that she has been prepared for a long time. Then she gently pushed Jiang Hai, motioning for Jiang Hai to lie down, and then she sat on Jiang Hai's body. With a soft moan, the old driver went on the road again. This drifting made Jiang Hai somewhat unprepared. "Hey, are you crazy?" Jiang Hai said to Prawalton in a low voice as he propped up his upper body. "Shut up. Just cooperate with me. You don't know how sad you made me these days. I thought it was enough for me to have a woman, but it was you who let me know it. Now I like it the most." Prawalton said to Jiang Hai with a look of displeasure as she glanced at Jiang Hai. "Even if you want to do that, you have to go back first. What's going on now?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was really embarrassed, but there were indeed some things that he did. Now that he mentioned it, it was really a bit troublesome. "What's going on? You didn't even tell me that you came to Atlantic City. What's going on?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton bent down while moving and looked at Jiang Hai with a playful expression. "I said, I'm here to discuss business." With a slightly awkward smile, Jiang Hai said somewhat speechlessly, "Then this is my business." Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Prawalton glanced at him and said with a smile, "Don't blame me for this." Looking at her engrossed appearance, Jiang Hai gritted his teeth. If he doesn't hurry up, who knows what will happen in a while. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai also took the initiative to join the battlefield and blew the horn to charge. "Hey, don't move." Feeling Jiang Hai launching a new round of charge, Prawalton was also taken aback. What a joke! She knows Jiang Hai's combat power. If he gets serious, she is no match for him. But Jiang Hai was not going to listen to her. Not only did he launch an attack, but his hands and mouth were also not idle. The instantaneous attack made Prawalton a little overwhelmed, and her body was powerless as Jiang Hai's attack came. On the other side, Cheryl, who was driving, kept looking at the scene in the rearview mirror. This made her subconsciously lick her lips and clamp her legs even tighter. But now that she was driving, she didn't want to have any accidents. But hearing the sound in her ear, she couldn't help but look at the rearview mirror, which could only make her drive very slowly. The drive that was originally more than half an hour took more than an hour to arrive. When the car drove into Prawalton's manor, she was already lying weakly on the steering wheel, and Prawalton was also lying weakly on Jiang Hai's body for the third time. As for Jiang Hai, he had also completed his second attack. Even if his physical fitness was 4 times that of ordinary people, he couldn't help but feel a little tired. Phew, get out of the car." After about 5 minutes, Prawalton sat up and forcibly pulled out the weapon that was still very strong. Ignoring the liquid that was flowing down from a certain part of his body, he opened the car door and walked out without wearing any clothes. "Hey, Looking at her directly getting out of the car, Jiang Hai subconsciously glanced outside. Sure enough, there were people outside. Several women in maid outfits were standing respectfully in front of the car door at this time. They ignored Prawalton's appearance, but they were looking at Jiang Hai curiously. This made Jiang Hai a little scared, and he subconsciously wanted to take his clothes and put them on, but at this time, Cheryl Lee in the driver's seat had already recovered. After walking to the car door, she grabbed all the clothes in her hand and handed them to the servant next to her. After the servant took the clothes, she directly left. Hey, my clothes! Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai really panicked and immediately shouted at that person. Okay, what's it a shout about? They're all women. What are you shy about? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl glanced at Jiang Hai. It's all this guy's fault. I can't keep my underwear today. It's precisely because they're all women that I have to be shy, okay? I'm not a woman. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was quite speechless. What kind of logic is this? Is there a mistake? Didn't I look at the almanac before going out? Why do I always run into female hooligans? Tisk, with your relationship with Miss Pra, as long as you are willing, they are all yours. What are you shy about? Hurry up and get out. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl looked at Jiang Hai contemptuously, then pulled Jiang Hai out of the car. This Cheryl and Prawalton were the same. They both had done it with Jiang Hai. Although Jiang Hai was a bit of a bastard, he didn't dare to hurt them. But he really didn't dare to use too much strength to hurt them. But when would it end if he kept pushing and giving in like this? Sighing helplessly, Jiang Hai grabbed the cushion on the seat next to him. No matter what, he couldn't just get out of the car like that. How embarrassing would that be? Covering his vital parts and bending his body, Jiang Hai walked to the car. Just as he got out of the car, Cheryl closed the door. This also cut off Jiang Hai's escape route, unless Jiang Hai wanted to run out naked. Looking at this situation, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. He followed Cheryl into the villa, while looking back 3 times with every step. Just as he entered the villa's hall, Jiang Hai was speechless when he saw the situation inside, because at this moment, Prawalton was lying on a huge sofa in the hall. She was still naked. There were 4 women beside her. 3 of them were beside her. One let her head rest on her long legs and gently massaged her head. Another let her legs rest on her legs and gently massaged her legs. The last one was squatting in front of her, peeling off the grapes in the fruit plate in front of her. After removing the seeds, she put them in her mouth and fed them to her. Chapter 511. The only one who was relatively normal was standing respectfully in front of the sofa. But the most abnormal thing was that everyone, including Prawalton, was naked. When Jiang Hai walked in, everyone looked at him with some curiosity, some envy, and some excitement in their eyes. Of course, Jiang Hai also knew the excited person. It was Barbara Martina, who was feeding Prawalton grapes at this time. Hey, Jiang, you're finally here. Miss, have you had enough? Is it my turn now? Seeing Jiang Hai coming over and feeding Prawalton a grape, Barbara Martina stood up excitedly and wanted to go to Jiang Hai. Hey, I've been holding back all the way. I'll go first. Looking at the excited Barbara, before Jiang Hai had time to speak, he was hugged from behind. He looked back and saw that the person hugging him was none other than Cheryl Lee, who brought him in. He didn't know when she was also naked, hugging Jiang Hai from behind. Oh my God, what the hell is this? Feeling the oppression behind him, Jiang Hai was a little numb. Is my hidden attribute really that of a duckling? Why don't these female hooligans consider my feelings? Hey, at least you have something to look and listen to, unlike me who has to wait here. Hearing what Cheryl said, Barbara couldn't help but yell at her angrily. They would retreat in front of Prawalton, but she wouldn't in front of others. Then I'll let you look and listen again. Hearing her words, Cheryl wasn't someone to be trifled with. She retorted forcefully. All right, aren't you afraid of making a fool of yourself in front of Jiang Hai? You've all tasted meat, so bear with it. Let the sisters who haven't tasted it go first. It's their first time, and they need your support. But at that moment, Prawalton waved her hand and set the tone. And hearing her words, the 3 women around her couldn't help but blush and lower their heads. Now, In their hearts, 70% were fear, 20% were doubts, and 10% had some inexplicable feelings. Hey, I'm not a breeder. I'm not here to breed, okay? Have you ever considered my feelings when you say that? Hearing that they had arranged his work, Jiang Hai was a little unhappy and said directly to Prawalton. And at that moment, Barbara suddenly took the opportunity when Jiang Hai was talking to take his cushion away. Yo, your mouth is tough, but your body is honest. I know your physical fitness. Don't say those useless things. I'll leave it to you. Looking at the cushion being taken away, Prawalton couldn't help but chuckle. Then, she winked at the three women around her. Although they were unwilling, they still walked over. They couldn't refuse Prawalton's request. If you don't want to, you can resist. Looking at the three women who walked over, Jiang Hai said to them, but they shook their heads. As for Cheryl and Barbara, they had already squatted down. To them, a feast was on. In a situation where Jiang Hai was powerless to resist, the battle unfolded in the living room. 2 hours later, the battle venue changed to the bathroom. An hour later, it changed to the kitchen. An hour later, it changed to the dining room. After another hour and a half, they returned to Prawalton's room. He didn't know if it was her original style, or if it was because she came back after seeing Jiang Hai's big bed. Prawalton's bed was also very big. It was 6 meters wide and 3 meters wide. It wouldn't feel small even if 6 or 7 people slept on it. At this time, Jiang Hai and Prawalton were lying side by side on her big bed. Jiang Hai's face was somewhat pale. Throughout the day, even when it was time to eat, he had been working hard to farm, even though his body was naturally gifted. He also felt that his waist was a little numb. This feeling was similar to when more than a dozen dolphins came into the manor. Jiang Hai released the aura of more than a dozen scales in one breath. The consumption was really huge. Are you trying to squeeze me dry? Jiang Hai said weakly as he looked at the 3 girls who were still working hard under him. These 3 girls were the ones that Jiang Hai had done something to earlier today. One was called Colin Barlovich, one was called Fail Fail, and one was called Isabel Roland. The last one, Isabel Roland, was Prawalton's housekeeper. At the beginning, these 3 girls were very shy and afraid of Jiang Hai. They were also unwilling to move too much. As a result, after the first round, Jiang Hai discovered that it was all an illusion. Because he was kind enough to treat these girls, there was some pain in the beginning, but there was no follow-up damage. But who would have thought that this opened the door to a new world in their hearts? They could be considered to have tasted the taste of the marrow, and they had been taking turns to attack. You don't live with us every day. What do you have to be squeezed dry? Really? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton rolled her eyes at him, and then touched Barbara, who was under her, and Cheryl, who was on her chest. They usually played like this. Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai was really speechless. Suddenly, Prawalton turned her head and looked at Jiang Hai curiously. By the way, I heard that the more you use a man's thing, the better it is. Seeing that you are so good, you must have played with a lot of women. How should I put it? Outside hunting, it's not that many times, only 2 or 3, and it's very rare. Specifically, there are some fixed ones, about 3. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't hide anything from her. After all, she knows that Prawalton likes women, so it is impossible between him and her. So Jiang Hai treats her more as a brother, although the situation between her and him doesn't seem to be so pure. Only a few? Bullsh asterisk T. I have seen the 10 beauties in your manor, and they all like you. Will you do anything to them? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton asked curiously. Cough. I'm still going to get married in the future. Besides, I'm a very possessive person. If they really follow me, I definitely won't let them go. At that time, who would want to be with such a playboy? And I can't marry them, so... Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little embarrassed. Don't you have a wife? We have met once. Hearing that Jiang Hai is going to get married, Prawalton was a little surprised. Well, that woman is indeed my wife, but nothing happened between us. Looking at her curious eyes, Jiang Hai thought about it and told her the truth about his love life. Speaking of it, Jiang Hai is really a shame for the rich. He not only doesn't have a proper wife, but he doesn't seem to have many lovers. In addition to Feng Yunxin and Ai Xiaoxi, there's only Selena Gomez. And the most important thing is that they're not by his side now. If he needs anything, he has to rely on little left and little right to solve it. It may be because of this that today, Jiang Hai will not refuse anyone. Wow, I didn't expect your life to be so complicated, but your life is a failure. Do you know how many women I have? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton said to Jiang Hai with a smile. I don't know. Discussing with a woman who has just fought with him how many women he has slept with, Jiang Hai is really... What the hell? This strong sense of contradiction is really not comparable to ordinary people. I should have had 517. Looking up at the ceiling, Prawalton thought for a moment and said, Me? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned. More than 500? Is it that exaggerated? The 5 of them are my wives and will always stay by my side. However, women will get tired of looking at them all the time. So, I will still look for new women all over the world. They will also help me find things. Looking at Jiang Hai's surprised look, Prawalton said with a smile. Looking at her smug look, Jiang Hai really wanted to slap her to death. I have played with beauties all over the world, the United States, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Japan, Korea, Xia, Soviet Russia, England, France, Germany. I have even played with North Korea and Africa. The women in each place are different. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton also excitedly talked about her love history. As for Jiang Hai, listening to her words, he had no other way but to smile awkwardly. He's really a rookie. Do you know where the women are the most delicious? As if she didn't see Jiang Hai's embarrassment, Prawalton said excitedly. I don't know. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai really didn't know this. South Korea is the most fun. Seeing that Jiang Hai really didn't know, Prawalton didn't keep him in suspense and said with a serious face, South Korea? Hearing her words, the first thing that came to Jiang Hai's mind was the South Korean girl group. Her looks were indeed good and her figure was great. But when he thought about the most famous thing in South Korea, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. They are very beautiful and have good figures, but don't you find that they look a bit alike? Looking at Prawalton, Jiang Hai looked at her and said with a smile, but as soon as his voice fell, Cheryl raised her head and glanced at him, which made Jiang Hai a little overwhelmed again. He forgot that there was still Cheryl, but Cheryl should be real. At least, Jiang Hai didn't feel any artificial traces on her. She's a natural beauty. I just want you to fight with them, not marry them. What are you worried about? Glancing at Jiang Hai, Prawalton directly refuted Jiang Hai's words, and Jiang Hai thought about it. It seems that she is right. Chapter 512. At night, the summer wind blew gently, taking away the heat in the room, and at the same time, it also took away that trace of strange smell. When it was midnight, Jiang Hai, who was sleeping in the middle, suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at the girls who were sleeping soundly beside him. Jiang Hai slowly got up. Because there were no clothes here, Jiang Hai could only walk out of the room with a bath towel wrapped around his waist. As soon as he walked out of the door, Jiang Hai couldn't help stroking his waist. What the hell? I won't be envious of those male protagonists anymore. It's really too tiring. It seems like our country's monogamy policy is not to protect the rights of women, but to allow men to live longer. After moving his body, Jiang Hai sighed. Since Prawalton got in his car, he had hardly stopped. In the car, he fought Prawalton twice. Here, he fought Colin Bavrovic, Fail Ferrio, and Isabelle Loren. Then, he fought Cheryl and Barbara. Then, he fought Prawalton. Then, he fought Colin Bavrovic, Isabelle Loren, and Fail Ferrio. It could be said that today, Jiang Hai didn't do anything else but fight. He fought a total of 13 times. Of course, the number of times these women fought was no less than that of Jiang Hai. After all, their fighting strength was not as good as Jiang Hai's. Jiang Hai had no problem fighting 2 of them at the same time. But fighting 6 of them at the same time, he was somewhat powerless. After all, he wasn't professional. After patting his waist, Jiang Hai went downstairs to the bathroom. After going to the bathroom, He went to the kitchen. He had fought so many times today, including in the kitchen, so he didn't eat seriously. No one's body could stand it if he only ate and didn't eat, so now he had to find something to eat. However, after opening the refrigerator in the kitchen, Jiang Hai was depressed. There was nothing but wine and drinks. That's not right. If there's no food here, what did I eat for dinner? Looking at the full plate in front of him, but there was nothing to fill his stomach, Jiang Hai couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. We don't store leftovers here. What we eat every day is freshly made, whether it's bread or other things. Vegetables and meat are only bought on the same day, so there's nothing in the fridge. Just as Jiang Hai was struggling to listen, a voice suddenly sounded beside him. Jiang Hai looked back and found that Isabel Roland had unknowingly run to his side. Compared to Jiang Hai, who shyly put on a bath towel, she was much more direct and naked. What the hell? You scared me. If you don't put anything in the fridge, where do you put it? Looking at the French beauty beside him, Jiang Hai was really shocked, but then he thought about it. What's there to be afraid of looking for food? So he asked her, "Come with me." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Isabella took out 4 bottles of beer from inside and walked outside with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai looked at her movements and couldn't help but be a little puzzled. What's she doing? Before Jiang Hai could react, she had already opened the door of the villa. Then 2 women in maid outfits appeared at the door. When they saw Isabel come out, they couldn't help but nod to her, indicating that they were greeting her. "Prepare some supper for me. By the way, we want to eat." After saying something to the girl outside, Isabella looked at Jiang Hai. It seemed that she was no stranger to ordering food with her body naked. She should have done a lot in the past. Anything is fine." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was still a little shy, but he whispered in the dark, "I remember that the people in the northeast of Huaxia like to eat kebabs. Let's do it like this." After thinking for a while, Isabella ordered the maid in front of her, then closed the door, and then took Jiang Hai to the balcony on the 2nd floor of the villa. She walked straight out of the villa and came to the balcony. At this time, there were a few chairs on the balcony. The chairs were made of real leather, and they were quite big boss chairs. Although Isabella was not short, about 1.75 meters, she was very thin, and when she sat on it, she sank into it. There were some blankets and the like on the chair, so she walked straight to the chair, curled her whole body into it, and then pulled the blanket over her back. She didn't have any movements to hide the moon and a certain brown forest in front of Jiang Hai, but made Jiang Hai a little overwhelmed. Following her in, Jiang Hai also sat on an old chair, pulled the blanket over his body, and didn't know what to say. Although we have already done that kind of thing, we don't seem to be very familiar with each other. Let me introduce myself. My name is Isabel Roland. I am a housekeeper of this manor and one of Miss Pulla's girlfriends. Of course, things like serving in bed are our honor. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't speak, Isabella opened a bottle of Budweiser beer alone. After taking a sip, she took the initiative to talk to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also moved his mouth and opened a bottle of beer. "Well, my name is Jiang Hai. I am from Huaxia. I am now running a manor in Boston." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also introduced himself. In fact, he guessed that these girls knew about his situation. As expected, the moment he finished speaking, Isabel had already said, "I know you. Your beef is the best." This batch of beef made Pulla earn a lot of money and made her position in the family rise significantly. She was very happy during those few days and even specially organized a party for a week. Unfortunately, at that time, you didn't have this kind of relationship with us. Otherwise, you could have joined as well. Just the party alone invited dozens of famous models and many socialites and outsiders. Hundreds of women openly organized a party here, and the atmosphere was quite good. If you came, you would have a great advantage, Isabella said, while throwing a flirtatious glance at Jiang Hai. This almost made Jiang Hai choke to death. He almost couldn't handle 6 of them, and hundreds of them. But thinking of that scene, he still wanted to live for a few more years. Ahem, I have a doubt. To be honest, do you really like women? If it's true, why didn't you resist when she asked you to accompany me? Since there was no way to continue this topic, Jiang Hai could only change the topic. But this matter was also the most puzzling point because he could see the resistance in these girls' eyes at the beginning. Resist? Why should we resist? Anyway, we just do what Miss Pula told us. She won't harm us. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Isabella said calmly, what's the situation? Looking at Isabella's appearance, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Why do they believe in Prawalton so much? What confidence do they have to be in her hands? Or is it because they have such a tendency? To us, Pula is not just a simple partner. In our eyes, Miss Pula is our sky, our God. We will not do anything to disobey her or make her unhappy. As long as she asks us to do so, even if she asks us to die, we will not blink our eyes. Moreover, in the beginning, when we were with you, we were indeed a little scared. But after that, it felt pretty good. We have never experienced this feeling before. Looking at Jiang Hai, Isabella said with a smile, but her words made Jiang Hai even more curious. What kind of feeling is this? Let me tell you a story. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, Isabella chuckled and then told a story to Jiang Hai. This story was a bit melodramatic, but very simple. This story happened in the middle of France. The girl in the story originally had a happy family, but her father drank something because he made a mistake with a bad friend. In the end, the family was broken. He also fell ill once, but he did not have the money to buy medicine. As a result, he robbed a store. When he went out, he happened to meet the police and was directly shot to death. After this incident, the girl's mother took the girl away from the small town and went to a nearby city. She married a stepfather with a bad temper and an extreme alcoholic. At first, it was nothing more than some beatings and scoldings, which the girl could endure. But when a girl was 14 years old, the stepfather actually wanted to rape her. She desperately escaped and called the police. The police took her stepfather away, but her mother scolded her for being a jinx. Because of her, the family that her mother had rebuilt with great difficulty was broken again. One night, her mother left the house with her younger brother. At the age of 14, she had no choice but to find a job in order to survive, but she was targeted by a group of hooligans. These hooligans had snuck into her house with the intention of harming her. When she was escaping, she accidentally fell down and was caught by these hooligans. Just when she thought that her life was going to end just like that, she suddenly remembered something. A woman descended from the sky. Her bodyguards knocked down these hooligans and gave them the punishment they deserved. She followed this woman to the United States, followed this woman, received higher education, and became one of this woman's girlfriends. To this girl, this woman was her everything, her God. No matter what, as long as she still wanted her, she would do anything. This was Isabella's story. Jiang Hai sat at the side and listened to this slightly melodramatic story. However, he knew that this should be true. The women in this story should not be Isabella and Prawalton. You can ask the other 4 stories if you have time, but they're basically similar to this. When the story was finished, the table in front of Jiang Hai and Isabella suddenly split open. A plate of barbecued meat rose from below and appeared in front of them. Chapter 5:13. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai woke up from his sleep with a special feeling. He opened his eyes in a daze and looked down. At this moment, Colin Barlovich and Fail Ferrio, whom he had just met yesterday, were working hard. Seeing this scene, there was no need to describe the feeling. I say, what are you guys doing? Patting himself on the forehead, Jiang Hai did not refuse their service. Early in the morning, as a man, he had a kind of, that kind of impulse. Someone help him take care of it. Cough. Seems to have gone off topic. See, I said you're using too much force. Just be a bit gentler. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Failure Ferrio patted Colin Bavrovich, who was still working hard, and said with a look of contempt, I'm sorry, I didn't think of that either. But I really like the taste of this. It would be even better if I added some of your taste. Colin smiled as he looked apologetically at Fail. Then do you want to do it? Since he's awake? Hearing Colin's words, Fail also came over. After the 2 women had a wet kiss, Fail looked at the person in front of him and suggested, Good idea. Following Colin's words, Fail stood up and straddled Jiang Hai. Hey, it's so early in the morning. Seeing Fail's actions, Jiang Hai couldn't help but immediately stop. I can't care so much. Ignoring Jiang Hai's words, the battle between Fail and Jiang Hai began. Of course, Colin, who was behind them, would definitely be involved. When Jiang Hai woke up, he glanced at his watch. It was 7:50 in the morning. When he came out of the room, it was already 9:20. On the other side, Colin and Fail were already lying on the bed like mud. Although Jiang Hai's strength wasn't as strong as he wanted to be, dealing with two of them wasn't a problem. After dealing with these two guys, Jiang Hai went to the bathroom to wash up. There was a new set of things prepared for him. He didn't hold back. After washing up, he walked out of the room with the blanket he took from the rooftop yesterday. But just as he walked out, a woman wearing a maid uniform, who looked to be in her 20s, was already standing at the door waiting for him. Mr. Jiang Hai, these are your clothes. We have already washed them. The woman looked at Jiang Hai and said seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai saw the clothes in her hand, so he immediately took the clothes with a smile. Where's Prawalton? After taking the clothes, Jiang Hai was ready to go back to change his clothes, but when he woke up in the morning, he only saw Kobe and Fail, which made Jiang Hai feel a bit strange, so he couldn't help but ask the maid. Master is dealing with official business in the study. Housekeeper Isabel is accompanying him in the study. Miss Cheryl Lee went out early. Miss Barbara is jogging outside. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the maid seriously said to Jiang Hai, "Oh, thank you." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled, then nodded to her. You're welcome. After you change your clothes, you can go to the study to find Master, or you can go to the dining room. The dining room where you ate yesterday. Breakfast is already prepared. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the maid nodded to him again, then said respectfully. Hearing her mention the dining room, Jiang Hai's mind couldn't help but flash a bad image. Then he smiled and flashed into the room. After changing his clothes, he left the room again. He first went to the study to take a look outside and found that Prawalton seemed to be checking some documents. Jiang Hai didn't disturb her, but went directly to the dining room and had breakfast. He has to admit, he doesn't know if Prawalton is very careful, or the people in this manor are very careful. Jiang Hai is a Huaxia person, and his breakfast is also prepared in the Huaxia style. To be exact, it's a northeastern style. His breakfast today is a bowl of tofu pudding and a few fried dough sticks, which are not common in the United States. Jiang Hai tasted it. Well, this tofu pudding also tastes very good, salty, and fresh. It's very good. Although the fried dough sticks are prepared in advance, they are still hot. The outside is crispy, but there's a trace of toughness inside, which is very delicious. After eating 5 fried dough sticks and a large bowl of tofu pudding, Jiang Hai is full. Then he went to Prawalton's study. Although he had a good time yesterday, he didn't forget that he still had something to do today. Walking into the study, Jiang Hai saw Prawalton and Isabel Roland. Isabel saw Jiang Hai come in, made a gesture to hush, and then motioned Jiang Hai to sit on the sofa over there. Jiang Hai is not a person who likes to make trouble, so he didn't say anything and sat on the sofa over there. Last night, after he and Isabel finished eating skewers, the two of them didn't get any closer to each other. Although they kept a certain distance from each other, after a heart-to-heart talk, the two of them were indeed closer than the other four. Today, looking at Jiang Hai, Isabel's face flashed a trace of blush. She is not a natural lesbian. She became a lesbian because of Prawalton's needs and because she has no other choice. However, after having a relationship with Jiang Hai, she doesn't reject Jiang Hai because she also likes that kind of love. You're up. I thought you were going to sleep until the afternoon. What do you want to eat at noon? How about oysters? I heard that they are very nutritious for men. I have a batch of the best Ghidorah oysters in France here. I'll ask them to make it for you at noon. I've prepared a good show for you tonight. You have to be alert. Time passed by minute. After Prawalton finished correcting this document, he raised his head and looked at Jiang Hai with a chuckle and said to him, Ahem, I don't think so. I told you before that I didn't come to Atlantic City to have fun. I have something to do. Hearing Prawalton say that there will be a good show in the evening, Jiang Hai was tempted for a moment, but he didn't come here to have fun. He still has something to do. So after hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai still told her the truth. Oh, you really have something to do? Is it convenient to tell me? Hearing that Jiang Hai really has something to do, Prawalton couldn't help but look at him with some doubts and asked puzzledly. It's not something that's convenient or inconvenient to say, but this is what the other party wants. I can only tell you that it's related to the royal family of the Middle East. Looking at Prawalton, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment and said no directly, but after all, the two are very close to each other, so close that they already know each other's depth, so Jiang Hai still revealed a little. The royal family of the Middle East. The famous Vihar, Muhammad bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Hearing Jiang Hai mention the royal family of Dubai, Prawalton said a name almost instantly. Jiang Hai was shocked when he heard the name. How do you know? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little dumbfounded. This guy is too powerful. It's not hard to guess. 90% of the royal families in the Middle East are very low-key. They're very prestigious in their country, but abroad, they're only called the Middle Eastern Nouveau Riche. But among these low-key people, there will be some more high-profile ones, and the one who has been the most active recently is him. Prawalton said with a chuckle as she tapped the table gently with the pen in her hand. Recently, he first quietly talked about a business with Huaxia. Of course, this so-called quietly. In fact, everyone knows about it. And now he wants to see you. Well, let me think. The business with Huaxia. Is it related to you? Are you from the imperial court? Prawalton bit the cap of the pen and asked Jiang Hai a little strangely. Damn, you are too good at deceiving people. But I am not from the imperial court. But this line was indeed pulled by me. You're not from the United States, are you? Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai was really shocked. From some sporadic fragments and his reaction, she probably figured out the situation of the matter. It seems that this woman is really not ordinary. At least in terms of IQ, it is not a problem for her to crush him. In fact, Jiang Hai is too lazy. When the Dragon Ball was transforming his body, it was also transforming his brain, but if he didn't develop it, then there was no other way. I'm from the Walton family, but second, I am Prawalton. The United States government, well, it has nothing to do with me, but you have to remember that you are now in the United States. This is something that can be used against you. Don't tell others easily, otherwise, someone will make things difficult for you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton chuckled and then said indifferently, well, this time I'm going to solve the problem of how to fight back in case someone tries to make things difficult for me or wants to take over my family business. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also seriously said to her, that's right. Oh, so confident? Then I will go with you. Looking at Jiang Hai's confident appearance, Prawalton chuckled. Okay. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai also nodded. Anyway, the deal between him and Du Feynman has already been agreed. He is not afraid of Prawalton interfering. Agreeing to let her follow is not bad for Jiang Hai. Where's the place? Seeing Jiang Hai agree, Prawalton also looked at Jiang Hai with interest. Caesar Palace. There's a UFC there today. That guy Du Feynman wants to see this thing, so he set the meeting place there. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said a little bit. After all, in some TV dramas and novels before, he had heard the name of this casino a lot, but he had never been there once. It was really a loss of face for the rich. There? Okay, let's go after lunch. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Prawalton chuckled. It seems that her little boyfriend still has a child's heart. Chapter 514. How is Atlantic City? Is it beautiful? Prawalton, who was lying in the passenger seat of Jiang Hai's battle shield and wearing sunglasses, asked Jiang Hai, who was driving. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod gently. It's very beautiful, but there are too few people. Jiang Hai is telling the truth. The buildings in Atlantic City are beautiful, the roads are wide, and there's a bay next to it. It looks like a treasure land. It is also the second largest gambling city in the United States and one of the top 4 gambling cities in the world. However, In Jiang Hai's opinion, this place is indeed a bit, well, too peaceful. There are very few people. Have you seen Atlantic Empire? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton turned to Jiang Hai and asked, but after hearing what she said, Jiang Hai nodded. Atlantic Empire is a very famous American TV series. Although he didn't finish watching it, he roughly watched it. Basically, it's about the founding of Atlantic City and the chaos of the Gray Gang here. After watching it for a long time, it became boring, so Jiang Hai didn't finish watching it. When Atlantic City was founded, it was just like Las Vegas. It was a normal city and had nothing to do with a gambling city. But in 1931, Las Vegas became a gambling city in order to revive the economy. After seeing the benefits of Las Vegas, Atlantic City also became a gambling city in the 1970s. But unlike Las Vegas, it's in the Southwest, and this place is under New York. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton also said to Jiang Hai, "It's nothing more than that after the founding of Las Vegas, the government is in charge, and after the founding of the Atlantic Empire, the real boss is the Gray Gang. What rules can the Gray Gang have? They rob people and customers everywhere. If they win money, they don't let others go. If they lose money, they let others go. This is the Gray Gang." It's precisely because of this that Atlantic City was very popular in the beginning, but in the 1980s, when airplanes became a common means of transportation, most rich people would rather go to Las Vegas than come here to play. When the tax revenue was reduced, the government reacted and began to vigorously attack the Gray Gang. Now, there are only a few rats in the entire Atlantic City. The Gray Gang was exterminated. Even the foreign gangs such as South U Gang, MO Gang, Latin American Gang, they were all wiped out. But the foundation built over the years is not easy for others to have confidence in. It's just like when the United States was reforming and opening up, there was a large-scale pollution of land and water, but that was many years ago. The land and rivers in the United States were already very clean, and some places even reached the standard of drinking water. But back then, the United States government said not to catch fish in the river to eat it. Everyone in the United States still abides by that. Otherwise, Asian carp wouldn't be as rampant as it is now, because they don't dare to eat it. It's the same in Atlantic City. As the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. The flow of people in Atlantic City is still lukewarm. There are many casinos, but more of them are closed than open. The total population of Atlantic City is only 50,000 people. It's hard to imagine that there are less than 50,000 people in a city. However, this was a place that many rich people like to live in. This was because the environment here was very good. Plus, there weren't even any rats here, and the Gray Gang was even rarer. Living here was very safe. So there are many rich people living here. Along the way, Jiang Hai listened to Prawalton's introduction. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The population of the United States isn't very small. There are about 300 million people, but compared to Huaxia, it's really too vast and sparsely populated. Of course, the most sparsely populated place is Canada, where there aren't many people at all. Along the way, the sea breeze blew as they looked at the slightly gorgeous city. Jiang Hai and Prawalton arrived at their destination, the Caesar Palace Hotel. In fact, the hotel's reputation is much bigger than it actually is. Before the MGM Grand Hotel was built, it had always been the world's largest casino. The headquarters was in Las Vegas, and there was a branch in Atlantic City. Of course, the current Caesar Palace is also a first-class casino in the world, but it's not as famous. After all, there are many rich people who are purely in pursuit of greatness. Caesar Palace is far from it. For example, Golden Sand, Cloud Top, Venetian, Monte Carlo, etc. These are all big casinos. Their guests, their entertainment equipment, and their standards were not inferior to Caesar's. However, Caesar had a unique advantage, which was that it was the first choice for all the indoor gambling matches. The most famous one is boxing, and in addition to boxing, the UFC that Jiang Hai wants to watch this time is also the same. After parking the car in the underground parking lot of Caesar Palace, Jiang Hai walked into the casino with Prawalton. When they walked in, the two security guards hesitated for a moment, but they didn't say anything, because in their view, Jiang Hai is definitely not dressed properly. After all, Jiang Hai likes to wear sportswear and outdoors. Over here, even if you didn't wear a suit, you would at least wear a casual suit. You would wear a shirt on the inside and a suit on the outside. Even if you didn't wear a tie, you could still wear a collar and leather shoes. To Westerners, this would be considered a set of formal attire. However, Jiang Hai is so casual, it really doesn't meet the standards of a guest, which makes the two security guards a little hesitant. The reason why they didn't stop Jiang Hai is because they know that Jiang Hai's car is worth millions of dollars, and Jiang Hai's watch is worth millions of dollars. These two alone are enough to blind their eyes. So they didn't say anything and just watched Jiang Hai and the others go in. In the United States, the rich are the boss, and there are not so many principals to speak of. When Jiang Hai and Prawalton walked into the casino, the situation inside really made Jiang Hai's eyes light up. The casino in front of him is divided into 3 parts, 2 large parts and a small part. The small part is for exchanging chips. The medium part is mainly for playing slot machines. Of course, slot machines are not only one kind of machine. There are many kinds of machines, just like the game halls in China, but unfortunately, there is no catch fish. Jiang Hai has no idea how to play the 777 slot machine. The other part is the gambling table. On the gambling table here, the most played is blackjack, in addition to 5-card stud, asterisk, 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 baccarat, and so on. According to the bottom of the chips, the color of the table is different. Behind each table is a beautiful woman who acts as a dealer. Of course, in addition, there are many waiters and security guards patrolling here. Although it is only around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Jiang Hai and Prawalton came over after having lunch at her home. However, there are already a lot of people here. In addition, there is a special living room here. The UFC fight will start there, but now it is closed. According to the painting on the wall of the casino, the space can seat 18,000 people. It is almost the same size as an NBA stadium. It is said that the one in Las Vegas is bigger. In addition, there are many small private rooms, which are left for the rich to play by themselves. After Jiang Hai arrived here, he looked around. Although he wanted to try his luck, Jiang Hai did not forget his purpose of coming here. He took out his mobile phone and called Du Feynman. The phone was picked up after a few rings, and then Du Feynman's voice came from the phone. It was still so forthright and fake. "Hi, Jiang, you finally called me. Are you coming over?" Looking at the person displayed on the phone, Du Feynman said enthusiastically. Hearing Du Feynman's enthusiastic voice on the phone, Prawalton was stunned. Jiang Hai said that he is not very familiar with him, but now listening to his voice, it does not sound like they're not familiar with each other. "I'm already at the casino. Where are you?" Shrugging at Prawalton, Jiang Hai said that he has no other choice. Then he asked Du Feynman on the phone. This guy has always been unreliable. "Me? I'm fighting. Haha. Do you want to come over and join me?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman shouted excitedly. "Fight? Forget it." Glancing at Prawalton beside him, Jiang Hai thought that the fight coughed, so it is better for him not to get involved. Prawalton on his side is very difficult to deal with. "That's a pity. I will ask my people to send you the tickets. You can play first. The fight starts at 7 o'clock. Your seat is next to mine. We will talk when we meet." Hearing that Jiang Hai is not interested in his fight, Du Feynman sighed helplessly, then told Jiang Hai to play by himself. In fact, the fight he is talking about is not the same as what Jiang Hai said. He is gambling, but even so, Jiang Hai is not willing to watch him gamble. If he wants to play, he can play here by himself. It is better for him not to get involved in the fights of the rich. After all, he is not really rich. Okay. After talking to Du Feynman, Jiang Hai also hung up the phone. Then, he talked to Prawalton, and the two went to the side to exchange $200,000 in chips, ready to go their separate ways to play. Prawalton lives in Atlantic City, and she is also a descendant of a big family, so she is very familiar with these kinds of games. Whether it is for her or for Jiang Hai, the $100,000 is just pocket money. So, after each of them took the $100,000, the two of them went their own ways to play. Jiang Hai also gave it a try, But soon it was proven that he was not the child of the plane of existence or anything like that. The plot of killing everyone in the casino, making money, stepping on people, and picking up girls in a novel is not there at all. He really does not know how to play. Chapter 515. The dealer has 18 points. Sir, I'm sorry you won. Looking at the J, Q, and 5 in his hand, Jiang Hai opened his mouth, but when he heard what the beautiful dealer said, he shook his head helplessly. Novels are really deceiving. What a scam. Watching the beautiful woman in front of him take away the $5,000 worth of chips on his table, Jiang Hai sighed and put in another $2,000. It seemed that he was going to die here. Actually, it wasn't a matter of whether he was going to die or not, but that this was the only game he knew how to play here. The way to win was the same for card stud and card stud. The biggest was a straight flush, followed by an iron stud, which was 4 of the same kind, followed by a calabash, which was a triple pair, followed by a straight, a flush, a 3 of a kind, 2 of a kind, and a scatter. Those who had watched Hong Kong gambling movies will not be unfamiliar with this method. But the problem now was that the movies were all lies. Where did this straight flush come from? Bullsh asterisk T, isn't it? Jiang Hai played 3 rounds. The biggest round was a 3 of a kind, but that was it. His opponent beat him with a small flush. If he played Texas, his hand would be even bigger because there were 2 matching cards. Almost every hand had a flush, a straight, and even a calabash was very common. But it was obvious that Jiang Hai wasn't that lucky. After losing more than $30,000 on that table, Jiang Hai ran away dejectedly. Fortunately, he was only here to play and broaden his horizons. He wasn't going to stick his head in here. After losing $100,000, it was unlikely that he would come back again. As for Baccarat, he just stood there and watched. Then, when he realized that he didn't even understand the rules, he endured it. Then, he played blackjack, which was the only game he understood. Unfortunately, he still lost more than he won. What was the dealer's greatest skill? Protection. This was because she wasn't specifically targeting Jiang Hai. As long as she calculated that she could win this game, then she would stop. If she calculated that she couldn't win, then she would add more. This was also the reason why she didn't want to lose money as a banker. Jiang Hai was one of those losers. He only had $20,000 left of his $100,000. Mr. Jiang Hai, so you're here. I've been looking for you for a long time. Just as Jiang Hai was waiting for the cards to be dealt, a big man from the Middle East came over and looked at Jiang Hai respectfully. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at him with some surprise. I'm Dofayman Weha Muhammad. Oh, I know. You're one of his men, right? Hearing that he was going to introduce himself and say Dofayman's full name, Jiang Hai immediately waved his hand to stop him. What a joke! Who would listen to this? Hearing Jiang Hai's interruption, the man nodded and respectfully handed over an envelope. This is the admission ticket that Mr. Dofayman prepared for you. There are 2 in total. We know that you came with a female companion. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. It would be strange if Dofayman didn't know that he came with a female companion. He didn't believe that the people in this hotel would monitor him here. Okay, I got it. By the way, how long will it take for Dofayman to finish? He's in good health. He's been fighting for so long. Is he still fighting? Taking the envelope, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment and asked the man, It mainly depends on the wishes of the other people and the financial situation of the other people. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, he respectfully said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled. Isn't he? Looking at the man, Jiang Hai moved his crotch, then raised his eyebrows and said to him, Oh, of course not. They are gambling in the VIP room. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man from the Middle East said with a black face. If an ordinary person dared to say that to Dofayman, he might have directly punched him. One must know that Dofayman was a member of Dubai's royal family. He wasn't someone to be trifled with. As his subordinates, they understood the principle of death when their master was humiliated. However, they knew that Jiang Hai was their lord's friend. Therefore, they could only swallow their anger. Oh, they are gambling. Take me there to have a look. Jiang Hai now had the mentality of a tourist. After learning that Du Feynman was not there to do that thing, Jiang Hai also became interested. Okay, please come this way. The waiter knew that the relationship between Jiang Hai and Du Feynman was very close. Most importantly, Du Feynman had just invited Jiang Hai to watch his gambling, so he didn't mind letting Jiang Hai go again. Wait a minute, I'll go find my female companion. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled, then glanced at the two cards in front of him, a 4 and an 8, adding up to 12 points. He definitely couldn't win with such cards, so he knocked on the table. With this knock, the dealer on the opposite side also took advantage of the opportunity to deal a card. When he saw Old K's ugly face, he knew that it was over again. Then he shook his head and stood up. He glanced around and saw Prawalton at a German gambling table in the distance. He pulled this person to Prawalton's side. After arriving here, Jiang Hai couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. He really didn't see that Prawalton was actually a master. Jiang Hai's side was about to lose everything, but her side didn't fall but rose instead. Looking at the chips, in addition to the initial 100,000, she seemed to have won another 100,000. Seeing her return to her cold queen image after leaving Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Because he felt that the money she won wasn't just because of her skills. Because at this moment, many men would unintentionally glance at her when they were looking at their cards. There was no other way. Such a cold and noble woman, no man would dislike her. And Prawalton was also sitting there, a pair of disdainful eyes glancing at the gambling table in front of her. When she looked at these men, she couldn't help but snort. What a group of disgusting guys. At this moment, the last card had appeared. Looking at the 5 cards on the table and the 2 in her hand, Prawalton casually threw out $5,000 in chips. It seemed that she was quite confident in this round. Hee, $5,000? It's not a small amount. Are you sure? Seeing her throw out $5,000, there were a total of 8 people on the table. At this time, 5 of them had already closed their cards, leaving only Prawalton, a middle-aged man who looked like a refined scum, and an old man who looked like a nouveau riche. At this time, the middle-aged man said with a smile, "If you don't follow, then close your cards." Hearing his words, Prawalton said indifferently, "Close your cards? Oh no, I'm just telling you you're going to lose money like this, beauty." Hearing Prawalton's words, the man also threw out $5,000 with a smile. The confident look on his face was really disgusting. Last round, raise. At this moment, the dealer glanced at the 3 people who were still following and said indifferently, 10,000, open your cards. Hearing this, Prawalton directly threw out $10,000 in chips again and then said indifferently. The old man thought for a moment and closed his cards. In his opinion, these cards are not worth so much. Only the middle-aged man was still looking at Polo Walton in front of him with a lustful gaze. $10,000, you're really generous. I'll follow this 10,000, but the upper limit of this table is only $10,000. It's not interesting. Why don't we bet outside? Looking at Polo Walton, the man said with a smile. Huh? Looking at his proposal, Prawalton couldn't help but raise his head and look at him. What does this guy mean? We'll bet $100,000 for this round. If you win, the $100,000 is yours. But if you lose, do me the honor of having a meal with us. Many people couldn't help but gasp when they heard what the man said. $100,000 in exchange for a meal? Many women felt a little excited when they looked at this guy who looked like a gentleman. He was handsome, had a good temperament, and most importantly, was rich and domineering. He was really the perfect partner. Not interested, but unfortunately, he was facing Prawalton. Now, except for Jiang Hai, she was still full of hostility to other men. So after a disdainful snort, she pushed the cards forward and motioned for the dealer to open. As for the man, after seeing Prawalton's appearance, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed, but this embarrassment only lasted for a moment, and then his face showed more and more interest in Prawalton. At this time, the dealer also opened the cards of the 2. Prawalton's luck was not very good in this game. Although she got a gourd, the other party's cards were a bit harder. It was a straight flush. More than $20,000 on the table had changed owners in an instant. Seeing this scene, the man couldn't help but sigh. If Prawalton agreed to bet with him just now, would it mean that he might be able to get close to the beauty? But he didn't care. He always believed that there was no girl in the world that he couldn't flirt with. A cold beauty like Prawalton was nothing more than a matter of time. It was that simple. Lost. But at this time, a man's stinky hand suddenly put on the shoulder of the goddess in his heart, and then an Asian face appeared beside his goddess. Seeing this scene, the man's index finger couldn't help but twitch. On one look, what made him even more unbearable was the attitude of his goddess. When she saw this man, the goddess who had always been cold suddenly smiled like a silly, sweet girl and showed off her victory like a little girl. Seeing this scene, the guy couldn't help but feel a fire burning in his heart. Too hateful. Chapter 516. Wow, that's amazing. At this time, only Jiang Hai could be tired of Prawalton. And the most important thing is that in Prawalton's heart, the only man who can be tired of is Jiang Hai. That's right, you don't know who I am. Hearing Jiang Hai's praise, Prawalton said with a smile, as if she had eaten honey. Looking at her charming smile and beautiful eyes, the men who originally had a lot of improper thoughts about Prawalton heard the sound of their hearts breaking at this time, especially the middle-aged man opposite them. Tisk, I really don't have any talent in this game. I only have 10,000 left of my 100,000. Smacking his lips, Jiang Hai said with a smile, and then took out his only remaining chip. If you want to play, take it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton also gave her chip to Jiang Hai. Shall by face, king of soft rice. Seeing Prawalton's action, the men here secretly scolded Jiang Hai in their hearts. Forget it, I won't play. This is Du Feimin's man. He said that Du Feimin is gambling in the VIP box. I'm going to take a look. Do you want to come? Looking at Prawalton, Jiang Hai asked her. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, many people's hearts jumped. The VIP box is not a place where just anyone can enter. Although looking at Jiang Hai's nondescript appearance, he doesn't seem to be very rich. But he can go to the VIP box, which shocked the people next to him, and many of the resentful eyes at that time disappeared. Even a middle-aged man sitting opposite Prawalton also restrained his gaze. At least before he knew who Jiang Hai was, he didn't dare to easily offend Jiang Hai. Okay, but Jiang Hai and Prawalton ignored these gazes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton also smiled, and then motioned to the dealer to change the money. The dealer quickly changed a check for $170,000 and handed it to her, but Jiang Hai didn't change his $10,000 chip. According to him, he wanted to take it back as a souvenir. The two of them left the table and followed Du Feimin's man to the VIP room. Looking at the backs of Jiang Hai and Prawalton, the people at the table continued to play while whispering because they didn't know who Jiang Hai and Prawalton were, although Prawalton had been here before. But who is she? Would the little princess of the Walmart play in the lobby? So 95% of the time when she came here, she would go to the private room to play while talking about business. Sometimes, she would play outside to accompany her new girlfriend. She would play a few rounds in a very low-key way and then leave. It was her first time playing like today, so it was normal for the person in charge of Caesar Palace to know her, but almost none of these individual guests knew her. No matter how the people outside talked about the two, they had already walked out of the lobby and went to the nearby private room area. The private room here was much stricter than the lobby. Not only did they have to go through the metal detector door, like going through security, but there would also be people checking their packages. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was used to being checked in China. Prawalton didn't bring anything today except her mobile phone. After all, she was with Jiang Hai. She knew that Jiang Hai was also a rich man. It would be troublesome to go out with him with a wallet. She didn't bring her handbag either. For her, she only needed to put on makeup. There was no need to touch up her makeup. After the two passed through the security gate, Du Feimin's people took them to the outside of a lobby. After knocking on the door and getting permission, the person opened the door. Jiang Hai followed him in. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai saw a huge gambling table in the splendidly decorated room. In addition to the dealer, there were 4 other people sitting at the gambling table. A white man, a black man, an Asian man, and Jiang Hai's friend Du Feimin. At this time, the chips in front of these people made Jiang Hai somewhat surprised. At the tables outside, there were chips of all sizes, with the smallest being $1. However, at the table where Jiang Hai and Prawalton were gambling, the minimum bet was $500, which meant that the smallest chip was $500. The smallest chip on the table for these people gambling here was 100,000. Fine, for the rich, this really wasn't a lot. Everyone had 1,000 chips worth $100,000 in front of them, which added up to $100 million per person. It was truly terrifying to be able to make $100 million just by playing cards. It wasn't that Jiang Hai didn't have $100 million, but he would have to be crazy to spend $100 million here. Hey, Jiang, you're finally here. Do you want to add a corner? Seeing Jiang Hai walk in with Prawalton, Du Feimin was stunned for a moment, then nodded at Prawalton before speaking enthusiastically to Jiang Hai. It seemed that he also knew Prawalton, which was understandable. Basically, there was no upper-class person in America who didn't know Prawalton. However, this little princess of the Walton family, who was now at the helm of Sam's Club, wasn't so easy to get along with. Her reputation wasn't very good. Of course, this so-called reputation wasn't referring to her private life. It was referring to the way she conducted herself. Her personality was quite strange, but she was extraordinarily capable. Coupled with the support of the Walton family, the world's largest business family, she only needed to show her ability. She didn't need to make any concessions or anything like that, and she could do quite well. As for her, many second-generation heirs and young masters had been warned by their families not to provoke her. Therefore, when Du Feimin saw her now, if she didn't take the initiative to express their relationship, then he wouldn't take the initiative to talk to her. Forget it, my money isn't used to waste. I really don't have any thoughts about the bet. Hearing Du Feimin's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. He was telling the truth. If he lost 90,000 yuan for 100,000 yuan, then he wouldn't be too distressed. However, if he lost 90,000 yuan from 100 million yuan, then he probably wouldn't be able to sleep for several nights. He would have to find a sunken ship to get it back up. However, with the blueprints he bought last time, he basically got all the ships that should be sunken. The remaining ships, if not small ships, were only worth 18 million yuan. Jiang Hai wasn't interested in them. They were just ships that sunk in awkward positions. For example, in the Cuban waters or in the Colombian waters. If Jiang Hai wanted to go to these places, how could he guarantee his safety? Therefore, in the current situation where there wasn't much night grass, Jiang Hai had better eat it sparingly. Oh, that's a pity. You know, this is a very fun game. You can do whatever you want. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feimin smiled, then sat back in his seat and began to play. Jiang Hai and Prawalton also sat behind him, looking at his cards. Seeing Prawalton sit down, the black man and the white man took the initiative to nod to Prawalton, but they also didn't speak. It was obvious that these two people also knew Prawalton. However, when the Asian man saw Jiang Hai and Prawalton, his expression was a little different. When he saw Jiang Hai, the main expression in his eyes was disdain and ridicule, but when he looked at Prawalton, his eyes flashed with a hint of amazement. It was obvious that he didn't know Jiang Hai or Prawalton. Even after Prawalton sat down, his eyes looked straight at Prawalton with a wretched face. Hey kid, do you want to play cards or watch something? Looking at his appearance, the 4 people sitting there frowned. Only Prawalton's face didn't have any other expression, but this made Jiang Hai a little unhappy, but he didn't need to speak because the black man over there had already spoken. What a joke, offending the people of the Walmart group. Can they still play? Play cards. Hearing what the black man said, the kid smiled a little awkwardly and then looked at the card table. It's your turn. What are you playing? At this time, the white man also tapped the table gently and said disdainfully. Hearing his words, the Asian kid's face flashed a trace of anger. But then he remembered that this was the United States, not his territory. So he forced himself to suppress it, and then he threw 10 chips with a smile, which was $1 million. While throwing, he also looked at Prawalton. It was obvious that he really liked Prawalton. Seeing that he had already thrown the money, the others didn't say anything. They didn't care about $1 million. After throwing the money, the dealer continued to put the cards. This time, they were also playing a card game. Indeed, after this kind of game appeared, it was much more complicated. It was more attractive than the traditional 5-card stud. Nowadays, people who gambled on big cards prefer to play this way. The 4 people seemed to have a tacit understanding. Each card was worth $1 million. Soon, 3 rounds were over. 2 cards were dealt in the first round, 3 cards were shown in the second round, and 1 more card was added in the last round. 4 cards appeared on the table. Basically, it was clear whether the cards in everyone's hands could be formed. Looking at the cards on the table, Du Feynman's cards were a little scattered, but he could put together the last card to see if it was a club. In that case, he could try for a flush. But even a flush wasn't a big deal in a card game. So after hesitating for a moment, he put down the card. And when he put down the card, the Asian kid over there also laughed and said, Chapter 517. What's wrong? The Middle Eastern nouveau riche can also be scared? Looking at Du Feynman, the Asian guy couldn't help but laugh. I'm just here to have fun. My money doesn't grow on trees. Shrugging, Du Feynman didn't care about this kind of provocation. Of course, the latter sentence was taught to him by Jiang Hai. When he asked Jiang Hai to invest in Dubai, Jiang Hai often said this. Hearing his words, the Asian guy also laughed, then took out 10 million and threw it into the pool. Seeing him do this, the white guy also put down his cards, and only the black guy followed. When the last card was revealed, the Asian guy's face was even more proud. Holding 2 cards, he looked at the black guy in front of him with a smile. Of course, he kept looking at Prawalton from the corner of his eyes. In his opinion, there was no woman who didn't love money. He naturally had his reasons for being so rich. There are only 2 of us left. How about 20 million for a small round? Seeing him being so rich, the black guy over there smiled and took out 20 million and threw it on the table. The Asian guy also took out 20 million and threw it on the table. Then, the cards were revealed. The Asian guy's cards were indeed not small. On the cards, there was an ace, 2 jacks, and 2 kings. This guy had a jack and a king in his hand, which meant that no matter which one he used, it would be a king captive gourd. Generally speaking, such a big card was enough to win. So when he showed his cards, he already smiled and signaled the dealer to give him the money. However, when the dealer showed the black guy's cards, his original smile instantly froze. The black guy's cards were very simple, a pair of jacks and a pair of aces. Although the top card of the ace card was not as good as his, this card was better than his king card. Seeing this scene, the Asian guy's face instantly turned green. Obviously, more than $30 million was not as easy as he said. He was also distressed to lose it just like that. The money is mine. The black man grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. After glancing at the Asian with contempt, he smiled and motioned for the dealer to bring the money to him. In an instant, the money in front of him was much more than the other 3. Wow, you guys are playing big. 30 million in one go. 100 million won't last long. Seeing that the black man directly received tens of millions, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little stunned. These people are really ruthless. My assets will probably become negative after playing with them for a night. Fortunately, I'm not addicted to this thing, or else it would be troublesome. It wasn't this big before you came. The biggest one was only 3 million. However, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman couldn't help but smile and talk to him. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also glanced at the Asian kid. Needless to say, this guy's purpose was Prawalton. Unfortunately, this round of 13 was not successful enough. Not only did he not get the girl, but he also lost more than 30 million. His face was green with fright. Cough. The one who won first is paper. Let's continue. Picking up the wine glass next to him and taking a big gulp, the kid pretended to be calm and said to the crowd. Then, he continued to throw a chip of 100,000, but his eyes didn't dare to look at Prawalton so presumptuously. It seemed that the failure of the 13 just now still had some impact on him. The most important thing was that more than 30 million, his heart ached. Who are these people? Looking at the Asian, Jiang Hai whispered to Du Feynman. He is the third largest individual shareholder of Google and Google. He has some influence in the upper class of the United States, but he is a playboy and has no real power. He has a good relationship with everyone. The black man is Offertrio Campos. He was originally a gray man in New York, but he stopped more than 10 years ago and opened a security company. Later, he invested in Blackwater International and is now the second largest shareholder of Blackwater International. His money may be the least among all the people here, but he is the one you can't provoke. Fortunately, this person is very well-behaved and low-key. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman also introduced the three people here to Jiang Hai in a low voice. But he first introduced the white man and the black man. When Jiang Hai heard that the black man was actually a gray man, he couldn't help but frown and put a label on him that he couldn't be friends with. As for the Asian, he is a Korean. According to their country's name, he is called Li Jihao. He is a member of the Samsung Financial Group. The current leader of the Samsung Financial Group is his father. Du Feynman looked at the Asian and said with a smile. Among these people, when he introduced this person, he used the least words. It could be seen that Du Feynman didn't think highly of him. Indeed, there was a big gap between the rich people in the East and the rich people in the West. In the West, such as the United States, when your money reached a certain level, your existence would affect the political situation of the country. For example, Bill Gates. No American president would go against him. Sometimes, his words were more effective than the American president's. This was his power. But in the East, no matter if it was Korea, Japan, or Huaxia, the rich people were just substitutes in front of the government. The country needs you to have money and your own ability. Only then can you be qualified to be rich. This was the biggest difference between a gold-based society and an official-based society. Even in China, people were shouting about how capable they were and how much money they had. But as long as the imperial court gave the order, even the most powerful person would have to kneel down. This was similar to the Soviet Union. In the past, in order to develop Soviet Russia, the Soviet government had created a lot of oligarchs. But now, Soviet Russia's financial situation had stabilized, and these oligarchs became the public enemy. This was the official definition of the imperial court in Soviet Russia. So, Soviet Russia took action against these oligarchs. Once these oligarchs fell, the country would take back their money, factories, and power. So, in Huaxia and Soviet Russia, having money was useless. Power was the most important thing. Otherwise, even a village chief could kill you like a pig. Although Japan and Korea were not like Huaxia, their situation was not good. At least, they were not as arrogant as the rich people in the U.S. To the Koreans, the young master of the Samsung conglomerate was a big name. But to Du Feynman and the others, it was just a small matter. They didn't need to be on good terms with him for what they wanted to do. He was only here to accompany the guests. Of course, Li Jihao did not think so. At this moment, he did not look like a guest. Instead, he looked like the main character. Of course, if it was in the U.S., the most powerful person at the table was Pra Walton, who was beside Jiang Hai. After all, this guy represented Walmart Group, the world's #1 group. It was not as simple as just saying. Under the attention of Jiang Hai and the rest, Li Jihao was a far cry from these old foxes in front of them. Originally, these old foxes did not care if they lost or won 2 or 3 million. They treated it as a way to pass time and accompany them to play. But now, since this guy was looking for death, they could not blame them. In the third round where Jiang Hai and the rest were sitting, this guy lost again. This time, he lost more than 20 million. This time, the 100 million in front of him was only left with 40 million. It was less than 50 million. His face was even more purple. In the 7th round, he lost again. This time, he was only left with 30 million. Looking at his reddened eyes, Jiang Hai could not help but feel a little funny. This might be a sign of addiction. In the 11th round, the white man casually said a few words to provoke him. After that, he bet the rest of his money. The result was self-evident. If they were not sure of winning, Why would these old foxes be so fierce? At the moment when the cards were revealed, this guy's face was also pale. He was indeed the eldest son of Samsung and the only son of the current head of Samsung. But since he was born in 1990, he was 2 years younger than Jiang Hai. With such a big family like Samsung, the internal strife within the family was naturally difficult to resolve. There were plenty of people eyeing their positions. And with his family style, it was naturally impossible for them to be like some idiot families who raise their children to be hedonistic or second-generation heirs. But which young man was not arrogant? Especially since he could do whatever he wanted in South Korea. But he also knew that although this $100 million was nothing to his family, if he lost it all, he would not be able to avoid a scolding. In a situation like this where people were afraid of losing, they would want to win back. And winning back also required capital, so his eyes instantly turned red and he was ready to take out another $100 million. But just as he was about to ask the dealer to give him the money, a person behind him who looked like a bodyguard patted him on the shoulder and said a few words in his ear. Hearing this person's words, the redness in his eyes gradually receded. Forget it, I'm not lucky today. I'll treat this $100 million as entertainment for you. I'm leaving. After slamming the table, Li Zhihao stood up and was about to walk out with a relaxed expression. But after just a few steps, he suddenly stopped and walked to Prawalton, who was still sitting there. I think you're quite bored sitting here. Why don't we go downstairs for a drink? Looking at Prawalton, Li Zhihao chuckled, then elegantly made a gesture of invitation and looked at Prawalton. But unfortunately, Prawalton would not spoil him and said coldly, I advise you to go see an ophthalmologist. I have a male companion. Oh, I don't think your male companion will mind. Hearing her words, Li Zhihao smiled disdainfully, glanced at Jiang Hai next to him, and said contemptuously, he heard Du Feimin's introduction just now. Perhaps the name of Samsung could not shock those black and white people in the United States, but it was not a problem to shock an Asian face. Chapter 518. Oh, are you a fart that I let out? You know my thoughts so well. But just as he was feeling smug, a mocking voice suddenly came from the side and entered his ears. Needless to say, the person who spoke was Jiang Hai. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feimin, as well as the other two Americans, laughed. They had to admit that Jiang Hai's words were quite lethal. Even Prawalton couldn't help but laugh. Kid, you're quite arrogant. You don't pay attention to what you say. Aren't you afraid of dying outside? Hearing Jiang Hai's words and the laughing faces of the people around him, the original smile on Li Zhihao's face disappeared in an instant. He stood up again and narrowed his eyes as he looked at Jiang Hai. For him, Du Feimin, the white man, and the black man, he didn't dare to provoke him. A nameless Asian dared to be so arrogant and even dared to insult him. You're courting death. Kid, to my friend. Hearing his almost blatant threat, Jiang Hai didn't say anything, but Du Feimin had already stood up. For a Middle Eastern tycoon like him, what he cared about the most was his face. This guy threatened Jiang Hai. Wasn't that making him lose face? Was there anyone at the table who didn't know that Jiang Hai was his friend? But before he could finish his words, Jiang Hai had already patted him on the shoulder, then looked at him playfully. With a look of contempt on his face, he said to him, Oh, are you threatening me? That depends on what you think. Hearing Jiang Hai's direct retort, Li Zhihao's supercilious character, which he had cultivated in South Korea, made him take a step forward and look at Jiang Hai with tit for tat. He, Li Zhihao, wasn't someone that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could bully. However, he thought that he wasn't someone that others could bully, but sorry, Jiang Hai wasn't someone that others could bully either, especially since they dared to threaten him in front of him. Jiang Hai had no intention of indulging them. Oh, if that's the case, I've fought with your mother before. Although your mother's skills are good, her plastic surgery was too much. Although I only spent one night with her, I'm still someone who has been through her front door and back door. When you see me, shouldn't you call me daddy or something like that? Crossing his legs, Jiang Hai raised his head and looked at Li Zhihao in front of him. Jiang Hai said slowly with disdain, You bastard, what did you say? Hearing that Jiang Hai dared to insult his mother in such a blatant manner, Li Jihao could no longer tolerate it. Originally, he was like a crown prince in South Korea. He didn't provoke others. Since when did someone dare to point at his nose and say such things in front of him? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the expressions of the three people at the table changed. The black man and the white man looked at Jiang Hai with some worry. As for Du Feynman, he was just watching the fun. With his friendship with Jiang Hai, in addition to the relationship between Jiang Hai and the imperial court, this time it was Jiang Hai who pulled the strings and built the bridge and Jiang Hai's capital. In South Korea, Jiang Hai would be dead for sure. However, this was the United States. Even if he was given 10 guts, he wouldn't dare to do anything to Jiang Hai. Moreover, Jiang Hai had Prawalton by his side. Do I need to repeat what I said again? Little bastard. Seeing that Li Jihao was about to go crazy, Jiang Hai still said disdainfully. Hearing that Jiang Hai still dared to say such things, Li Jihao also went crazy. He went up and punched Jiang Hai's face. With this punch, everyone in the room, except for Jiang Hai, stood up, especially Prawalton. He dared to hit Jiang Hai in front of her. She thought that this guy didn't want to stay in the United States anymore. However, before she said anything, Jiang Hai waved his hand and stopped him. He touched his cheek. What a joke. His physical fitness was 4 times that of an ordinary person. Li Jihao's punch was almost like scratching an itch. Hey, you hit me? Touching his face, Jiang Hai stood up. With a height of more than 9 meters, he looked at Li Jihao condescendingly, but his eyes were full of ridicule. Seeing that Jiang Hai still dared to be so arrogant, Li Jihao also stared back. I not only dare to hit you, I also dare to kill. Looking at Jiang Hai, he said word by word, but unfortunately, before he finished speaking, Jiang Hai instantly backhanded him. With a loud bang, a backhand slapped heavily on his cheek. After Li Jihao was slapped 720 degrees in the air, he fell heavily to the ground. At the moment of landing, before his brain could react, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Don't get me wrong, this was not an internal injury. Jiang Hai just had a strong physical fitness. He didn't know how to use force to hit. His slap directly knocked out a few of this guy's big teeth. The white fragments that were spat out with the blood were these teeth. Looking at Li Jihao, who was lying on the ground and completely stunned, Jiang Hai would not let him go easily. He pulled the corner of his mouth and quickly walked over, but Li Jihao didn't come alone. He still had 3 bodyguards. When they saw the conflict between Li Jihao and Jiang Hai, they were already on guard. When Li Jihao hit Jiang Hai, they would definitely not help. If they saw that Jiang Hai had any intention of fighting back, it would be time for them to take action. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai moved too fast. They didn't see what was going on at all, and Li Jihao was already lying on the ground. Seeing that Jiang Hai was still not going to let Li Jihao go, these people, under the command of a middle-aged man, instantly rushed towards Jiang Hai. However, they just took a step and forced themselves to stop there. Let's see who dares to move. The one who spoke was Du Feynman because at this time, the bodyguard behind Du Feynman instantly pulled out their guns. It was originally a very simple thing for bodyguards to carry guns, but in the VIP room of Caesar Palace, bodyguards were not allowed to carry guns. This was the most basic rule, but there were always exceptions. Rules were created to be broken. Du Feynman was not an ordinary Middle Eastern local tyrant. He was the royal family of Dubai, and he had the right to not trust the people in Caesar Palace. If he lost a hair here, it would easily cause a diplomatic dispute. All Americans knew what kind of people the United States was. If there was a dispute between Caesar Palace and the royal family of Dubai, the higher-ups would probably give up on them. They didn't even need to hold a meeting. Therefore, if these royal families and princes came here play, they would use their own bodyguards, and they were also allowed to carry guns. Of course, if something happened, these royal families and princes would pay for it themselves. Although they knew that Du Feynman was unlikely to shoot, these bodyguards couldn't afford to gamble. What if he shot? They didn't dare to kill Li Jihao, but if they killed them, although there would be trouble, it shouldn't be difficult to settle. There is no shortage of heroes in this world, but they really didn't think that they would be so stupid to rush up and be killed. At this time, Jiang Hai had already walked to Li Jihao's side and bent down to look at him on the ground. At this time, Li Jihao shook his head and was more or less awake. When he raised his head and saw Jiang Hai, a trace of fear flashed in his eyes, followed by great resentment. He couldn't help but spit a mouthful of bloody phlegm on the ground. Looking at Jiang Hai, this guy was still angry and shouted loudly, "Let me tell you, if you dare to hit me, you're dead. You're declaring war on the Samsung Lee family of South Korea. You're destined to die a horrible death." However, what greeted him was Jiang Hai's smiling face. He continued as if he didn't hear him, "It seems that I have to go to South Korea when I have time. Now that I see you, I think of your mother again. That old fox's skills are really good. I heard that you have a younger sister. I haven't played with mother and daughter yet. When the time comes, I must give it a try." "You beast!" Hearing that Jiang Hai dared to insult his mother and sister in front of him, although his mother had divorced his father, he couldn't tolerate it. He forced himself to get up and swung his fist at Jiang Hai again. Jiang Hai was still punched in the mouth, but other than leaving a bloody mark, there was nothing else. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai instantly raised his foot. Li Jihao flew out and directly hit the wall behind him. This time, Jiang Hai couldn't play with him because he hit the wall too hard and directly fainted. However, Jiang Hai estimated that this kick of his would make Li Jihao lie in hospital for at least 10 days to half a month. "You dare to be so arrogant with this little skill? If it weren't for my soft-heartedness, you would have been beaten to death." He walked in front of Li Jihao. As they said, Jiang Hai didn't dare to really kill him. If he killed him, it would be a diplomatic dispute. Although Jiang Hai deliberately let him make the first move, and it was caught by the camera, this was considered a legitimate defense. However, if his defense was excessive and he accidentally killed someone with his current ability, there would still be some trouble. "Hey, you are still soft-heartedness? Shameless, but I like your character very much. Let's go." Since the bet is not established, and you have no intention to get involved, then let's go eat. After eating, we will watch the competition. However, I feel that you should be stronger than those who fight in the UFC. TSK, really good. Seeing Jiang Hai stand up again and walk back, Du Feynman also smiled and signaled his bodyguards to put away their guns. The 3 bodyguards on the other side knew that they couldn't take revenge today. After glancing at Jiang Hai and Du Feynman, they quickly helped Li Jihao and ran out of the private room. Although Jiang Hai had a sense of propriety, nothing must happen to the Samsung Crown Prince. After leaving Caesar's palace, everyone drove directly to the nearby hospital. As for Jiang Hai, he followed Du Feynman and Prawalton to the restaurant here. The steak in the restaurant was also from Jiang Hai's manor, but they bought it from Prawalton. The taste was still very good, especially for Du Feynman. It was really different every time he ate it. After dinner, Du Feynman, Jiang Hai, and Prawalton went to the hall over there, ready to watch the UFC. Chapter 519. Is this fun to watch? Walking into the hall, after Jiang Hai and Du Feynman sat in the front row, Jiang Hai asked Du Feynman next to him. To be honest, this was the first time he came to watch this thing, so he really didn't understand it. If you like to watch ground fighting, then it's quite interesting. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at the hall in front of him. The hall they were in at this time was really not small. In addition to an octagonal iron cage in the middle, chairs and other things were placed not far from the periphery. There were many seats, but to be honest, there were a lot of people who came to watch. According to Du Feynman's introduction, this thing was just like boxing. If it wasn't a boxing championship or a focus battle, there wouldn't be many people who would buy tickets to watch it. He just happened to be in time, so he came to take a look. But even so, the ticket price for their first row was $1,600. Hearing this price, Jiang Hai couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. These people really dare to ask for money. They even dare to charge so much for a broken chair. In fact, Jiang Hai was not ignorant about the UFC. At least before he came, he deliberately looked it up. The full name of the UFC was Ultimate Fighting Championship. It was a new type of fighting competition. In Chinese, it is the Ultimate Fighting Championship. It is currently the world's top and largest professional MMA event. This fighting competition was established for a very short time. It was just established in 1993, and its headquarters were in Las Vegas. The concept of this fighting competition was inherited from Bruce Lee's fighting philosophy, but the Real Foundation was the representative family of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the Gracie family. However, they were no longer the only big family. Among them, Muay Thai, karate, jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling, kickboxing, and other fighting events were also introduced into the competition. It could be said that this competition was the most unruly competition. Aside from headbutting, gouging eyes, pulling hair, stuffing hands or feet into the opponent's mouth, biting, kicking vitals, picking nostrils and ears, twisting fingers, striking vertically downward with the tip of the elbow, such as jumping up and striking the opponent's head with the tip of the elbow, attacking the spine and the back of the head, attacking the opponent's kidneys with the heel, grabbing the throat, grabbing the collarbone, and kicking the opponent's head when they are down. Other actions were allowed. Of course, taunting, spitting at the opponent, or insulting the opponent was not allowed. After all, this was graduation. The ones fighting were athletes, not ordinary hooligans. It could be said that they had the least number of rules among all the fighting competitions. However, because it was not an Olympic event, Huaxia itself did not place much importance on this kind of gambling competition. It was precisely because of this that Huaxia Kung Fu, which was known as one of the 4 major fighting techniques in the world, did not have much of a reputation on this stage. No Chinese were willing to fight, so there were not many Chinese people who came to watch. This thing was different from the WWE. Although the WWE was fake, there was one thing that was different. They had a storyline. Watching this thing was like watching a TV series, so it could attract a large number of fans in China. In the future, if they acted in TV series or movies, it would not be too sudden. After all, there was Dwayne Johnson. However, the UFC was different. This competition was very popular in Europe and the United States, but almost no one cared about this competition in China. However, as more and more people in Huaxia began to pay attention to the lethality of martial arts, some people entered this competition. The most famous one was grassland wolf Zhang Taekwon. His fighting strength was quite good, but because of the limitation of his body size, his results were not good. Therefore, although his record was not bad, it was not particularly good. However, with his participation, some people from Huaxia also joined this organization. According to Du Feynman's introduction, the people who competed here would not earn less than ordinary boxers. Of course, this referred to the people in the middle and lower levels. The top level of boxing was the world's largest gambling event. For people like Zhang Taekwon, the appearance fee for a competition was 100,000 euros, not including the prize money for winning. If they won all 4 fights in a year, their annual income would easily exceed 600,000 euros. If they fought in a focus fight or a belt defense fight, they would earn more, and there would also be a TV commission. However, if you were to compare yourself with Mayweather and the others, you would still be far behind them. After all, they could earn hundreds of millions of dollars just by fighting once a year. That was no joke, and that didn't even include the endorsements. What kind of nonsense was that? However, although these people had some fame in the UFC and some fans abroad, there were still too few people in China who knew them. Even some third-rate stars were more famous than them. Today's UFC fight was just an ordinary fight night. It wasn't a championship fight. While Jiang Hai and Du Feynman were chatting, the match had unknowingly started. The first fight of the day was a light heavyweight fight. The two sides were a white man named Misa and a black man named Daniel Jolin. This was the first time that Jiang Hai had seen such a fight. However, it was obvious that Daniel was better at boxing and standing attacks, while Misa was better at fighting on the ground. And that was the truth. After the first round began, the two of them started fighting. It was important to note that UFC fights were basically only 3 rounds, and each round was 5 minutes long. As long as the referee did not stop the fight, the two fighters could continue to attack. This was also the most popular attraction here. This person called Misa wasn't weak at all. However, he was indeed no match for Daniel when he was standing and attacking. But when the two of them fell to the ground, the situation instantly changed. Daniel struggled to break free from Misa's ground combat, but he was careless and once again fell to the ground. Misa was lying on Daniel's body, and his fists were like raindrops falling on Daniel's face. At first, Daniel was still defending, but these people were very good at short-range attacks. After a few blows, Daniel was already stunned. The referee immediately stepped forward to stop the fight. TKO meant that the referee determined that the fight could not continue. It was also a type of KO, but it was not as obvious as a KO. As the referee stopped the fight, Misa was also victorious. Looking at the fight in front of him, Du Feynman was very excited, but Jiang Hai frowned slightly. He did not care much about this kind of fight. This might have something to do with the tyrannical gene in his heart. He did not like to fight on the ground. Indeed, if he wanted to, the average person would not have the chance to fight on the ground. He could go up and beat the opponent directly. This was his strength. So after watching 2 fights, Jiang Hai was a little bored. He asked Du Feynman, "Where's the thing I want?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman turned his head and looked at Jiang Hai. Seeing that Jiang Hai did not seem to be interested in the fight, Du Feynman shrugged helplessly. "Are you that anxious?" "Yes, there is nothing to watch. If these 2 people fight together, I can beat them in a minute." Hearing Du Feynman's words, Jiang Hai shrugged and said indifferently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman could not help but be speechless. Sport competitions were like this. Why do people like to watch them? First, because sports competitions were very hot-blooded, known as the battlefield of the peaceful era. Second, it was because these were things that people wanted to do but could not do. Ordinary people attached their own wishes to these athletes. Watching them compete, they reminisced about their dreams. This was why sports competitions were so attractive. However, if a person's strength surpassed the level of these people, they would not have the leisure to watch. Sometimes they might be bored and turn on the TV to watch, but most of the time, they would not pay attention to it. Take Jiang Hai, for example. He used to like playing basketball, but when he found out that he was better than anyone, he lost interest in it, including the UFC fight in front of him. Well, your life is really boring. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman shrugged gently. Then he took a safe from the bodyguard next to him and stuffed it into Jiang Hai's arms. After Jiang Hai took the safe, he also checked the things inside. It was indeed what he wanted, the oil futures transfer contract. The style, paper, and even the words on it were exactly the same as the 2 in his hands. The only difference was the number. The original 400 million, 600 million now became 1 billion. Seeing that the numbers were all correct, Jiang Hai closed the safe with a smile. Then, he took out a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Du Feynman. After taking the paper, Du Feynman glanced at it. It was the transfer contract of the jewelry that Jiang Hai stored in Miami. This time, the 2 of them did not owe each other anything. Du Feynman, I'm a little confused. You are a very smart person, but why would you let me take advantage of this? Since the contract was in his hands, Jiang Hai would not hand it over again. But at this time, he was a little confused. Why would Du Feynman let him take advantage of this? He did not understand. After all, these 2 things were not equal. I have 2 reasons. First, I really want this batch of jewelry to be useful. You also know that we don't have much oil in Dubai, so we need to make money from other sources. Tourism has always been our top priority, but there are many rich people who are willing to come here to play, but there are too few who are willing to settle here. Moreover, we don't have any famous tourist attractions in Dubai other than the Sailing Hotel. Originally, I was worried about how to continue developing, but this batch of antiques and jewelry that you brought suddenly gave me a burst of inspiration. If I put a sunken ship full of antiques and jewelry in our bay, do you think there will be fewer people willing to come here to play? Looking at Jiang Hai, Du Feynman explained to Jiang Hai with a smile. Chapter 520. That's also true. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but open his mouth. It was really difficult for him to understand the world of the rich. Spending $1 billion to get these jewels from the sea and then throwing them back into the sea. Using this to attract tourists to dive and play, well, Jiang Hai didn't know if it was right or wrong, but it was indeed a good project. If he went to Dubai, and someone told him that there was a sunken ship full of real treasure at the mouth of the bay, and that he could sneak in for $100, he would probably go too. In that case, Dubai had an annual traffic of about 70 million people, according to the airport statistics. If 1 out of 10 people went to play, that would be 7 million people. If each person paid $100, that would be $700 million. If he could make $700 million in 1 year, he would be profitable in 2 years. Of course, this was all a matter of course. If only 1 out of 100 people went, there wouldn't be that many people. But ships didn't cost much. If they broke, they could be replaced at any time. The jewels wouldn't break either. This was a way to make money with almost no cost. The only person in the world who could easily collect a large number of antiques and real jewels at a low price seemed to be Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai believed in his first idea because it was really a way to make money. Jiang Hai even wondered if he could learn from Winthrop and get a sunken ship or a warship. The United States didn't have a lot of other things, but there were plenty of warships. After all, warships needed to be maintained and replaced. During World War II, the United States launched many ships in a month and used numbers to flatten the Pacific Fleet of Japan. After the end of World War II, nuclear power became the new power source. Too many ships with conventional power had reached the age of retirement. Most of them were thrown to coastal cities. Some with a sense of history were turned into museums, such as the one Jiang Hai saw in Boston. Some ordinary ships were either melted down or abandoned. These ships were very cheap. A destroyer could be bought for hundreds of thousands of dollars. After all, those were all scrap iron, but if these scrap iron were to be brought to Winthrop, it would be a perfect tourist attraction. It wasn't easy to come into contact with a warship in China, but here, if they could visit it for $1, many people would be willing to spend the money. On the other hand, diving, catching fish, and searching for treasure, $100 was simply a good price. Well, I almost believed you. But what's the second reason? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai turned his head and looked at Du Feynman beside him and continued to ask him. Hearing Jiang Hai's second reason, Du Feynman smiled. I remember you said that you invited me to your manor as a guest. Then let's go tomorrow. I'll tell you later. Looking at Jiang Hai, Du Feynman said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing Du Feynman's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. Originally, he had invited Du Feynman over just to be polite. However, he didn't expect that Du Feynman would really come. Moreover, it seemed that Du Feynman was interested in his manor. Okay, although curious about why Du Feynman wanted to come, Jiang Hai still nodded and agreed. That's really great. After we watch the game, I'll set up a team here. We can have some fun and then leave together tomorrow morning. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman looked at Jiang Hai with a gaze that all men understood, and then smiled slyly. Jiang Hai was just about to agree, but Prawalton, who had been sitting beside him, kicked him lightly. Looking at Prawalton, who was sitting upright, Jiang Hai really didn't expect that she had been listening to their conversation. However, Jiang Hai didn't care. Since she was here, he didn't mind letting her know some details. This might not be possible. I'll come to you tomorrow morning. I have a date with a beautiful woman tonight. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he tilted his head and looked at Prawalton. This made Du Feynman slap his forehead, as if he just remembered her. Jiang, you're a lucky guy. The Walton family is just like the Abu Dhabi consortium in our world. Although they keep a low profile, their strength is unimaginable. If you really want to be with Miss Prawalton, whether it's a blessing or a blessing, you have to decide for yourself. Du Feynman shrugged at Jiang Hai and said to him with a smile. Hearing Du Feynman's words, Jiang Hai also touched his nose. Indeed, he also knew that Du Feynman was doing this for his own good, but between him and Prawalton, there were some inexplicable feelings. But he was also very clear that between him and her, there shouldn't be too much of a connection. After all, The concepts and thoughts of the two were completely different. They might really be together because they needed each other. After chatting with Du Feynman for a while, before the game was over, Jiang Hai had already left with Prawalton. After locking the box into the compartment of the car, Jiang Hai and Prawalton drove back to the Walton Manor. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Prawalton hesitated for a moment and said to him, "Jiang, I don't know if you will believe me. This Du Feynman is not as simple as he looks." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai, who was driving, also smiled. Sure enough, she heard the conversation between them. "I know, I have never thought of him as simple." Nodding, Jiang Hai was very sure that he would not underestimate Du Feynman. Although this guy usually pretended to be stupid, in fact, Jiang Hai never knew what this guy was thinking. But he only knew that this guy didn't like to use his brain, so he was a little stupid. In his eyes, people all over the world were a little stupid, but this guy was pushed out by the Dubai royal family to become the spokesperson of Dubai. This meant that this person was definitely one of the smartest people in the Dubai royal family. If you treated these royal family and these people as fools, it was possible that in the end, he would swallow you whole. It's good that you think so. I'm just reminding you. Seeing that Jiang Hai's words didn't seem to be perfunctory, Prawalton didn't continue to speak. She also didn't ask Jiang Hai what he got, nor did she ask Jiang Hai what he paid. He had to admit that this woman, who knew when to advance and retreat, was really smart. At least, she understood people's hearts better than Jiang Hai. If it were him, he probably wouldn't be able to hold back his curiosity and ask. But sometimes when this question was asked, it would cause a rift. Moreover, he and Prawalton weren't that familiar with each other. Then Prawalton took the initiative to change the topic, starting with the night scene of Atlantic City. Yes, it was already night. Speaking of Jiang Hai's beef, Jiang Hai also said that he also raised sheep and donkeys, which were all excellent breeds of Huaxia. This made Prawalton a little curious. She wanted to taste the Huaxia protected breeds that Jiang Hai mentioned. The only pity was that these protected breeds couldn't be promoted, and only Jiang Hai ate them. The two talked as they drove. Not long after, the car had already stopped in front of Prawalton's villa. After the car stopped, Isabel Roland was already standing respectfully in front of the car, wearing a set of official's uniform. She took Jiang Hai and Prawalton and then led the two into the villa. As soon as they walked through the door, Jiang Hai heard a burst of voices in the villa's hall. Although they were speaking English and their accent was a little strange, Jiang Hai could hear that there were about 20 women's voices. He couldn't help but look at Prawalton beside him. Prawalton just smiled and didn't say anything. She continued to lead Jiang Hai in. When the three of them walked into the hall, Jiang Hai saw that there were more than 20 women in the hall at this time. However, those 20-plus girls were all of Asian descent. Their appearances were more or less the same. They had large cartoon-like eyes, sharp chins, high noses, long straight hair, slender necks, and beautiful collarbones. Furthermore, even though they were wearing clothes, their clothes were very simple and unadorned. Their deep cleavage, small waists, and long white legs were exposed. Among them, the most eye-catching feature was Cheryl Lee's slightly round face. As for the rest of the women, to be honest, Jiang Hai thought that they were all about the same. What's the situation? Looking at the group of women in front of him, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Why did she call him back so anxiously for this? He looked at Prawalton. What is this little girl trying to do? Didn't you say that you haven't tasted these Korean girls yet? Today, I'll let you have a good taste. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton slowly walked behind Jiang Hai. She wrapped her arms around Jiang Hai's waist and looked at him. Hey, this is a bit too much. Looking at the women in front of him, Jiang Hai felt his scalp go numb. Is she trying to kill me? He was already feeling a little powerless when it came to fighting 1 against 6, let alone 20. What kind of joke is this? These women were all specially found by Cheryl. I heard that they were all streamers in South Korea. They have sweet voices, good figures, and can even dance. This is a gift that I've meticulously prepared for you. Don't be a killjoy. Let's see where your limit is. All right, ladies, I believe Cheryl has already told you the purpose of your visit today. Let's move. Following Prawalton's order, the women in front of her quickly made their battle preparations. Hey! At this time, Jiang Hai was still not ready. Just as he said that, the women had already pounced on him. Chapter 521. Issa. The next morning, when Jiang Hai walked out of Prawalton's manor, he actually couldn't walk properly. In northeastern terms, he was having a hard time walking. Looking back at the villa, Jiang Hai sighed. Last night's experience was indeed not bad, but if he did it a few more times, he probably wouldn't be far from the middle of his lifespan. Those Southern Korean girls were more than a little crazy. At first, someone even asked him if he wanted to wear a raincoat, and Prawalton said, "Whoever gets pregnant with Jiang Hai's child will be rewarded with $10 million. In an instant, the girls went crazy. They used any part of their bodies to help Jiang Hai. This was indeed a feeling that Jiang Hai had never experienced before. These Southern Galley girls were indeed in good shape. Although they all looked about the same, to be honest, they were very much in line with the current aesthetic standards. They had big eyes, sharp chins, high noses, small mouths, white and tender skin, and their somewhat unscientific upper body and waist. It was really a little surprising. According to them, their waist only had this effect after they lost 2 ribs. As for the rest, it would depend on training and the like. Just as Prawalton said, Jiang Hai was just fighting with them, not marrying them. In the past, Jiang Hai always felt that girls like this were no different from high-end blow-up dolls. But then he thought about it. High-end dolls would cost around 80 to 100,000 in China. He might not even be able to spend that much on a wife. Of course, if he met some weird people who wanted a house, a car, or a RV, that would be another matter. But basically, many families didn't sell girls. Since the conditions of the 2 families were similar, it was basically a 50-50 split. There wasn't much to pay attention to. Most importantly, a wife who spent so much money to marry really wasn't as good-looking as them. But that night, Jiang Hai was almost done for. He didn't sleep at all. Since he came back last night, he had been free until now. He limped to his car, started the engine, and left helplessly. "Miss, are you going to let her go just like that?" At this time, in a room on the 2nd floor, Isabel Roland slowly walked to Prawalton, who was standing by the window and watching Jiang Hai leave, and asked her, "He's destined not to belong to me. Perhaps it's better for us to just have these crazy memories." Through the gap between the curtains, Prawalton watched Jiang Hai's car driving away without any expression on his face. "Miss." Hearing Prawalton's words, Isabel Roland couldn't help but sigh, and then hugged Prawalton from behind. She did this to let Prawalton feel her presence. Prawalton gently patted her on the arm. She had already felt what she wanted to express, Jiang Hai. Jumping over Prawalton's body, Isabel also looked at Jiang Hai's car in the distance. Isabel didn't know how to feel about the person who took away her body, but she knew that this feeling made her feel a little reluctant when she watched Jiang Hai leave. But when she thought of Jiang Hai, she felt a little sweet in her heart. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know that 2 women were watching him leave. After leaving the manor, he went to the Caesar Palace he went to yesterday. Because he had already made an appointment with Du Feynman, he would be a guest in his manor today. Of course, the so-called guest was probably just looking around. Although Jiang Hai didn't know his pulse, if he wanted to see, Jiang Hai would not refuse. Of course, if he was interested in his manor, no matter who he was, Jiang Hai would slap him away. What a joke! That was something he would never sell. There was no one else. "Mr. Jiang Hai, you are here." When Jiang Hai arrived at the Caesar Palace, the person who saw him yesterday was already waiting for him at the door. When he saw Jiang Hai coming down, he quickly greeted him and said respectfully, "Didn't you say you were going to my place today? Where's Du Feynman?" After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai asked this person curiously, "Vroom, vroom, vroom." But before this person answered, Jiang Hai suddenly heard a deafening roar. Then, a silver-white light flashed from the underground parking lot of the Caesar Palace. In the next second, a rather avant-garde sports car with a metallic feel and personality appeared in front of him. The whole car, was silver white, and the whole car presented another kind of streamline. The front of the car was made into a W shape. In addition to the prominent driver's seat, there were two front tires on both sides of the car. There was only one driver's seat in the car. The driver's seat was made of transparent orange glass, and there was only one seat in the driver's seat. Du Feynman, whom Jiang Hai just asked, was sitting in this seat at this time. After arriving in front of Jiang Hai, he gently drifted and parked the car side by side beside Jiang Hai. Then he opened the car's lid. Well, Jiang Hai didn't know how to describe it. It was like a car skylight, but the whole driver's seat was made of glass, so when it was opened, the car instantly became a convertible. "Hey, Jiang Hai, you're too late." Looking at Jiang Hai, Du Feynman said with a smug face, "Your timing is quite accurate. Knowing that I'm here, you deliberately came over to show off. TSK. To be honest, your car is really good." Looking at Du Feynman, Jiang Hai also smiled, then touched his chin. "Looking at this car, it's really cool. This is Lamborghini's concept car, Lamborghini Egoista. This is Italian, which means selfish. This car has 600 horsepower and a 5.2 LV10 engine. In order to get this thing, I spent a lot of effort, but fortunately, this thing is quite cool." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman also smiled and said, it was obvious that he was also very satisfied with this car. TSK. This car is really good, but there's no way to carry people? You've been driving this car by yourself. Walking around the car, Jiang Hai nodded. It was indeed very good. He heard that the Dubai tycoons were obsessed with Lamborghini, causing the people in China to like this car very much. In the past, Jiang Hai didn't like this big bull very much. Compared to bulls and horses, he preferred tridents and the like. But now, it seemed that this big bull was better than other sports cars for a reason. "Hey, driving this car is my little baby. By the way, how's the road at your place? Is it okay to drive this car?" Although he wanted to show off, Du Feynman still said happily, "No problem, I've flattened it." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai replied with a smile, then sat on his shield. Originally, the road in Winthrop wasn't very good. Of course, it wasn't too bad either. It was basically similar to the first-line roads in China. It was inevitable that there would be some bumps when driving, but ordinary cars would have no problem at all. Sports cars wouldn't have a big problem, but supercars would be more or less troublesome. However, since Jiang Hai was attacked and Winthrop was expanded, Jiang Hai and the town jointly funded the repair of this road. Now the road in front of Jiang Hai's house was much smoother, and there would be no problem for anyone to drive on it. Seeing Jiang Hai start the engine and drive away, Du Feynman also stepped on the accelerator and followed Jiang Hai. After he left, two Rolls-Royces, which were the ones in Jiang Hai's house, followed closely behind. A nouveau riche was indeed a nouveau riche. He drove a supercar, and his bodyguards also drove an RV. He was really rich. Because Du Feynman was in the front this time, and he also paid the fine for Jiang Hai for speeding along the way, Jiang Hai drove very fast. His shield naturally couldn't be compared to a supercar. Compared to an ordinary sports car, his shield was much slower. After all, this car was bulletproof. With such a thick steel plate on the car, how could it run so fast? So even if he ran as fast as he couldn't reach 200 kilometers per hour, but it wasn't a problem to maintain 150 or 60 kilometers per hour. It took Jiang Hai nearly a day to drive here, but it only took him more than 5 hours to go back. At around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he had already arrived at the airport in Boston. In about half an hour, he could go home. He deliberately called home at this time. After all, Du Feynman was a member of the royal family. It was impossible for him to not eat a meal when he came here. And his bodyguards, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to let them starve, right? At this time, preparing lunch was the best choice. After Jiang Hai called, Xiaoyu came out of the room and began to prepare a rich lunch. Daliana, Marion, and Bernice were there to help. While they were preparing, Jiang Hai and the others had unknowingly arrived in front of his manor. However, when Jiang Hai drove to the front of the manor, he was stunned for a moment. It was because he didn't know when, but there were a lot of people standing outside the gate of his manor. Looking at these people who had the same skin color as him, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled. Du Feimin was even more puzzled. He stopped the car far away. His identity made him have to be careful. The two Rolls-Royces behind him also stopped there. Seeing Du Feimin stop, Jiang Hai drove to the front of the gate. Looking at these people in front of him, he was a little puzzled. These people weren't here before he left. What were they doing now? Were these people tourists? Are you also here to buy seafood? Go to the back and line up. There are people here who want to buy seafood. Seeing that Jiang Hai actually went directly to the gate. Although many people here didn't recognize Jiang Hai's car logo, it didn't prevent them from knowing that this car was definitely valuable. It wasn't hard to imagine why a rich person would come here. Immediately, someone in the front of the line shouted at Jiang Hai, "You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."